Welcome to Draft Utopia. Chris Ransom here. William Yanish and Joseph Potter will both be joining me shortly. William still getting settled still getting set up. Joey playing Where's Waldo in Jacksonville. How situation? I'm not going to go into detail. Podcast. I don't think Joey would be cool with that. So I'm just going to tell our audience Joey's playing Where's Waldo in Jacksonville. All right, 4 top for you guys today. We're going to start with the projected number 1 picks in the OHL, WNBA, and NFL drafts, Elite 8 previews, WNBA mock, and an NFL mock. I am going to, since William's not here yet, I'm gonna preview some of the Canadian Hockey League playoff games. Now the OHL does look kind of bland this year. Erie Otters that just massacred the Saginaw Spirit without nothing lead. William is here, I think. Yeah, he just got here. Perfect. So that happened. Briefly touching on some of the CHL playoff series. I'm not going to get into the OHL. That was kind of bland. The Quebec Major Junior Hockey League playoffs, the Moncton Wildcats, they have Destiny Noir's number 1 pick in the Quebec draft. He's going to be a top 10 pick in the NHL draft. He's off to a good start in the playoffs, but I think the Western Hockey League's probably the most exciting. Number 1 team conference is the Medicine Hat Tigers. They have Gavin 6 NHL draft, and the Everett Silvertips have Landon DuPont, a defenseman, the number 1 pick in the 2027 NHL draft. And I saw those two meet earlier in the regular season where Gavin McKenna got a hat trick against Duke. It's interesting because Medicine Hat ends the regular season on a 10-game winning streak, and Everett had the best overall record, losing to Medicine Hat earlier in the regular season. But that's just the CHL playoff update. I'm going to get you guys updated on the number 1 picks in each draft. We've got the OHL draft, the WNBA, and the NFL draft. I think a few weeks ago, we didn't know who was going to go number 1 in the OHL or NFL. I think that is much clearer now, Willie. I'll get the OHL out of the way because it's the least interesting of the 3, according to more like hockey, but according to you, Joey, and our listeners, NFL is the most interesting. The other 2 is interesting, but I'll get the least interesting out of the way. Warren's going to go number 1 to Peterborough. Peterborough Petes have the number 1 pick for the first time in the history of the Ontario Hockey League. Tennessee Titans have the number 1 pick for the first time in the NFL draft. I love it when a team has the number 1 pick for the first in the draft. I love that because it's an opportunity to get a franchise player to reload your team and to try to do something special with that individual. So I love it when a team gets a number 1 pick for the first time. So Peterborough, they do lose 2 20-year-old right wingers. They could take the consensus number 1 player in Charlie Marotta. The thing is, Charlie Marotta had no points in the 3-2 loss to the Toronto Junior Canadiens. And it was a heck of a hockey game, William. I know there was March Madness on last night, but I really didn't feel like watching Ole Miss, Michigan State. I didn't really see an NBA player on either team, but Michigan State's shooting guard's now in the top 12 on Tankathon. Wasn't at the beginning of the tournament. Wasn't even in the second round at the beginning of the tournament, now at the top 12. So that is worth pointing out. I'll get to the college basketball in a bit. But as far as, the OHL draft, I don't know what Peterborough's going to do. They could take a right winger. They do lose 2 20-year-old right wingers. Thing with the OHL and the Canadian Hockey Leagues, William, is you have to be between the ages of 16 and 20. You can be drafted as early as 16, and you can play until you're 20 if you're not drafted. And then you can go to college if you do not get signed by an NHL team. So there's different rules and stuff. It's unique in a sense, but looking at former number 1 in the OHL draft, there were 5 OHL Cup MVPs. Ethan Belchetz, last year's OHL Cup MVP, went number. Connor McDavid, the Oilers captain, Conn Smythe Trophy NHL last year. He was a he won pick in the OHL draft. You want proof? Here's a picture of Connor McDavid as a kid on the Toronto Junior Maple Leafs. This is from 2012. It's the Nail Yakupov draft. He was the biggest bust in NHL. I'm not going to get into details on that here. We got a lot to get to today, but yeah, this is an old Hockey News magazine from 2012. But, you know, as far as former number 1 picks, Stamkos was an OHL Cup MVP, and you got guys like Shane Wright and Michael Misa in this year's NHL draft. They were OHL Cup MVPs, and if you got the number 1 pick and you got an OHL Cup MVP like Cameron Warren, preseason favorite to go number 1 overall, had a goal and assist in the championship game, I don't care if he struggled at the beginning of the year. He stepped up in the biggest game of the year. In the biggest game of the year, you help your team win 3-2, get an assist, and the assist is the game-winning goal. Go number 1, in my opinion. So that would be my case for Cameron Warren. For Charlie Murata, you can make a case for a number of these guys in Chris LeBlanc's top 5. I'll read through the list quickly, but I think before we get to the WNBA and the NFL, Charlie Murata, Jake, number 2 player. Max Delcy, a center on the Titans, is number 3. Caden McGregor, a captain's number 4, and Warren's 5th. Warren was the preseason favorite to go number 1. He fell to 5 in the rankings, but he led his team to the OHL Cup championship. And if you lead your team to the championship, you're MVP, you get a goal, and the numbers for him are just exceptional. The numbers for Warren are exceptional. I'm talking 13 goals, 9 assists, and 22 points in 11 games. William, that's the guy I'm taking number 1. I cannot, if I'm evaluating these amateurs, I just can't ignore that consistency. And for Warren at 1, but I could see Murata, Siak, Delcy, McGregor. I could see any of those 5 go number. Richard in Scouting College Hockey has made a case for Brock Cheateroni. Cheateroni came in at 8th on these rankings, but he did win Player of the Year in his Bantam League. So he could be a dark horse to enter this conversation as well. But I think this OHL draft is very deep. I mean, Peterborough said it's a deep OHL draft, and it just feels more wide open than the WNBA or NFL drafts. Now, the WNBA, she was number 1 recruit in high school, recruited higher grade than Caitlin Clark coming out of high school. She went back to Connecticut. She did the NBA draft yesterday. Paige Buchers is getting Paige Buchers. Dallas needs her in the worst way possible after trading Luka Doncic away. Right now, the Stars and Rangers are the only exciting now in the Fort Worth area, and the Arlington Renegades. Everybody else sucks. I mean, Clark Hunt, the Chiefs owner, traded their best player, Seattle, in the MLS. The Mavs traded Jones as well. He's Jerry Jones. What else do you want me to say about the Cowboys? But the reality is,
I can say a little
the
bit about
Dallas
the Cowboys,
in the worst way possible with this number 1 pick in the upcoming W. Pulls a Shaq and leaves Dallas after a rookie contract. They need her in the worst way possible. And Tennessee Titans, it sounds like they've settled on Cam Ward. So just looking at this, if I had to place a parlay bet, I would go Cameron Warren, number 1 to Peterborough. Dallas Wings get Paige Buchers in the WNBA draft, and Cam Ward goes to the Titans. Yeah, the Titans could get Abdul Carter, but Abdul Carter didn't work out his pro day. Cam Ward dominated his pro day to the point where both the Titans and Browns are looking at him, and now you've got multiple reporters, John Vogel, Clay Travis of Outkick, saying Cam Ward's Titans is pretty much a done deal. I can't really overwhelming amount if that's the case. Even if you did Ward being the best QB in the draft, when there's that much evidence presented, Ward's probably going to go number 1 in the NFL draft. What do you think of those number 1 picks, William? Do you think that's pretty much how it's going to play out?
I'd like to throw out the fact that I'd like to know how many times that someone named Cam was taken #1 overall. Because you talked about Cam Warren and then Cam Ward.
Cameron Warren, his full name is Cameron Warren, but you got Warren. There was a goalie named played for the Carolina Hurricanes. He won the 2006 Stanley Cup the first year after the lockout, and now people are going to. You got the Miami Hurricanes quarterback named Cam Ward coming into the NFL. I know, it's crazy.
Yeah, well, Cam Ward is not my QB1, but he is the obvious choice for whoever is taking
Cam Ward
quarterback.
Will get into the Hockey Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is a different story, but Hockey Hall of Fame, since he was up very early in his career, very good goalie, and he probably will get into the Hockey Hall of Fame. But the NFL, that's a different ball game.
I think if you think parlay bet, man, I'm actually going to get online and make that
day one starter. I think he's a day one. I think he's got potential to be a Pro Bowl QB. I think he's got the best chance of reaching his ceiling. That doesn't mean he has the highest ceiling. I think he has the best chance of reaching his ceiling from a probability standpoint.
For sure.
That's why.
For sure. Okay. I've got a leg first on him, and he compares so well. He's got so many similarities to Jalen Hurts, and in a proper year, I definitely see, him falling to the end of the first or, beginning of the second round somewhere in that area, but this is a year and quarterbacks are always in need. Everybody knows that, but like I said, Tennessee, they need a quarterback. They played around, with Malik Willis and Will Levis, and that's a third round and a second round quarterback. It's like it's just time to go ahead and initiate that full on rebuild and find your quarterback, find the one you like, and take him. I mean, there's not much sense in trading down because of the quarterbacks this year. I don't see anybody, throwing out some unbelievable, offer for it. So it's one of those things where you got to stick and pick your guy, get to know the quarterbacks, and just find the one that you like. And that's the one you take, man. Find the one that you feel is the best bet. Cam Ward has a pretty high ceiling, I don't see many problems with him, outside of the fact that I don't see much fire in him, much urgency. And that's my problem with Cam Ward. But, like I said, Tennessee has to take the quarterback, so I'll just leave it at that.
The top 6 on my board is Travis Hunter, Will Campbell, Abdul Carter, Will Johnson, Mason Graham, Ashton Ginty. I have Cam Ward at 7 on my board. Floor grade of 85 out of 99, ceiling grade of 91 out of 99. Because the learning curve is, he will reach his ceiling by the end of his rookie year or by year 2 at the latest. But he does not have the highest ceiling in terms of QBs, in my opinion. But I think he will reach. He's got the best probability of reaching his ceiling. My QB2 is Shedeur Sanders, but my floor grade for him is a 73 out of 99. Ceiling is 93 out of 99. So when the floor is that much lower than the ceiling, there's a 50-50 chance the QB reaches their ceiling. And when you factor in other variables like attitude, work ethic, that you want to lower that probability from 50% to maybe 30 or 20, William, right now. Maybe 25 with the right coaching staff.
Yeah. And
for Shedeur Sanders,
I don't see
he has
much
a
in Shedeur,
high ceiling, but you also think the odds of him reaching are stacked against him. Like, I'm probably in the same boat there.
So far, well, the only quarterback that I have left to evaluate is Quinn Ewers, and I had a high second on him as a preseason.
I got
grade.
him my number one QB in round 3 at 65. I have Quinn Ewers at 65 on my big board. I have Jackson Dart at 68, and I have Jalen Milroe at 84. But I have thirds on all of them, and I have Will Howard at 85. I have thirds on all of them. Right now, if I
saw some things. I just got done with my Kyle McCord evaluation. I'm not going to spoil it because it will be coming out like today or tomorrow, somewhere in there. But let's just say that I like him pretty well. Oh, man. Well, he dropped out. But, you know, Kyle McCord, what I see is a quarterback that did very well with Ohio State in his first year starting. His second year at Syracuse, he set records, and I just feel that he is a good quarterback. It's not that great of a look to go from Ohio State to Syracuse, you know, and that's a question that I have, and it was one thing that Daniel Kelly, you know, kind of pointed out to me, you know, to transferring from Ohio State to Syracuse. But, you know, I mean, Kyle McCord is from New Jersey. You know, he's closer to home. His dad played quarterback for Rutgers, you know, back in the day. And like I said, I like the kid. He has some good qualities about him, and you'll just have to wait to see for my evaluation, see where he falls amongst the rest of these quarterbacks. So
honestly, the way I'm looking at this with my mock draft, I'm probably going to put Cam Ward at 1, and then I might put Shedeur at 7. I'm looking at the fact that I have a second round grade on Shedeur. Right now, Cleveland's probably the most conflicting team. I want to hear what Joey has about Cleveland when we get to our NFL mock later. Hearing a lot of conflicting reports with the Browns. Adam Schefter, Charlie Campbell of Walter Football, and Otter, the ESPN insider for the Browns, all are hearing Abdul Carter to the Browns is a done deal. But they need a quarterback. They don't have the cap space to take on a Kirk Cousins contract. And any room, and Bill Sparks, who's a Browns fan like Joey, who came on our show in the fall, actually did an article last night on Cousins. Browns cannot trade for Kirk Cousins. They do not have that luxury with Watson screwing up with the cap space. I agree with that entirely. I remember 2 years ago when everybody mocked Will Anderson to the Texans at 2, and I basically kept saying, Texans don't have their quarterback. This is a shit test by mainstream media to try to get people to change their mock draft. Stood firm and kept Stroud at 2. And you know what? Shit test. Most of the media failed that shit test. But it's all good because the Texans traded up for Will Anderson at 3. So the mock drafters who had Anderson and Texans, you guys were right. You were just off them. You guys were still right, but you did fail the shit test. So,
I'm not doing a much for what do you call it? Mock drafts, but you know, CJ Stroud was my number 1 quarterback, you know, that year, and I mean, it wasn't relatively close.
Yo, and Daniel both love Stroud. I remember.
You know, I had him. He has a lot of similarities to Jared Goff, just not the attitude, you know, and or you know, for that matter, just with his play, put it that way. I won't put it any more than that. And no,
I think he's to Goff, like you point out, but I would also argue that Stroud is higher than Goff. More fire, more passion, more intensity than Goff. That would be my counter argument to, and that's not a knock on Goff. I would argue that Stroud's upside's a little higher, and he just higher than Goff does at times.
You know, things.
But quarterbacks, when they played each other, they threw a lot of interceptions last year in the Sunday night game.
That I had with CJ Stroud was the fact that Well, how do I put this? The offense calls at Ohio State, they were coming into each individual player, who Ohio State doesn't have the quarterback, call out the plays during the in the huddle, and that was the one thing that I, had with Stroud, was wondering how he would translate to the NFL with the play calling, getting in the huddle and going from X to Z to Y and just all that good stuff. So, but hey, look, you're back.
Okay. Yeah, Restream turned off my screen for a second.
A little bit touchy too, but
yeah,
just so you know.
No worries. Okay, I did get a draft question from Tracy. I want to share the draft question Tracy Porter posted before we get into the Elite Eight for college basketball. And for some reason, Restream is not loading Tracy's question, which I'd appreciate if Restream would load Tracy's question. So show, I just want to post the question. It's about the draft. This is a good question. It's an engaging question. So why can't we post the question? It's a good question. It's a Steelers question. Do you think the Steelers will take Jackson Dart in the first round if he's still on the board at 21? That's the question. I really did want to screen share that question because it's a great question, Tracy. It is. See, okay, now we see the question. Thank you, Restream. Thank you. That was not so difficult. Did not have to make that so difficult. But yes, I do think the Steelers will draft a quarterback. I don't think it'll be at 21. I think it'll be at 87 in the third round because I think what they will do is maybe they don't have a second round pick. So I'm looking at the 4 guys I have third round grades on: Ewers, Milroe, Dart, and Will Howard. I think if any of them fall to the third round, that's where they're going to draft a guy, because if he screws up, they have nothing to lose and they can draft another quarterback in 2026 when the draft's in Pittsburgh next year. And they can take the best player on their board in the first round. They traded their second round pick to Seattle for DK Metcalf, so they're not going to have a second round pick. And the player they've drafted in the first round will probably be a defensive player, if I had to guess, because now that you've got Metcalf and you've got Pickens on a rookie deal for one more year, and I think they got another receiver. They've got Roman Wilson, but they got another receiver, I think, in free agency. I just forget who it is at this moment, William, but I'm pretty sure they added another weapon in addition to Pickens.
As for Jackson Dart, I don't think it's fair to draft him in the first round. He is a good quarterback.
I don't think he's the third best quarterback in the draft. I think Quinn Ewers is the third best quarterback. You think Milroe is the best quarterback in the draft, but you also realize he's not going to be picked before Ward and Shadur Sanders. So, and there are rumors. Colin Cowherd saying that Milroe to the Steelers at 21 may happen. And even though I don't have a quarterback going to Pittsburgh at 21 in the final mock that I'm going to do, they might actually pick one. We have to be prepared for the possibility that Pittsburgh picks a quarterback at 21, because the other day when I caught up with my mom, she's a Steeler fan, by the way, she basically used the words piss poor to describe the Steelers handling their quarterback situation. Not poor, piss poor. When my mom is calling the Pittsburgh Steelers front office piss poor, that turns their quarterback situation from a code orange to a code red, just like that. And I know you're chuckling, William. The Patriots and fan in me is chuckling a little bit too. It's chuckling a little bit too. I wish Joey was here because he would really amplify this trio of Yinzer's suffering. But yeah, really, even though I do take, I like the Pirates because they actually listen to my draft suggestions and think draft utopians. I don't know. For some reason, the Steelers do their own thing, and it usually backfires. So it is what it is. At this point, And because I hate them the most of those three teams in my city, I'm going to roast him for it like Joey does when he roasts teams. But, it is what it is. But if my mom's describing the Steelers QB situation as piss poor, there's a problem. Aaron Rodgers wants to come to Pittsburgh. The thing is, I heard he's not going to sign. I heard they've only offered him $25 million. He wanted $40 million. That turned out to be false. He actually wants $50 million or he's going to retire. That's what's been surfacing yesterday. But I heard earlier in the week on Tuesday, $40 million or he's not signing with Pittsburgh. I don't think Aaron realizes that the teams have more leverage than him at this point in his career. I mean,
better kick rocks, man. He's the most arrogant, selfish quarterback that there is.
40 years old. He's coming off his worst season with the New York Jets, and he has absolutely zero leverage at this point. He could probably still be a starter on Pittsburgh or Cleveland, but he's only going to get $25 million to go to Pittsburgh, and Browns are probably only going to offer him $20 million, and that won't stop him from picking a QB at 2 if they love a QB in this draft. But that's all Rodgers has on the table. I mean, the Giants got their 2 QBs because Rodgers waited too long, demanded too much money. The Vikings are the one team Rodgers is rumored to have interest in, but they've already said McCarthy's going to be their starter, even though I think Rodgers benching McCarthy for another year, having him learn the playbook for a second year and starting Rodgers, I wouldn't be opposed to that if I were the Vikings. But the Vikings want to roll with McCarthy. So
McCarthy needs to be developed, man. I
like
saw some
McCarthy,
things with
but
him.
if Rodgers wants to play for the Vikings, I'm giving that serious consideration.
I got him.
And unlike you, I'm actually high on McCarthy, but I wouldn't turn down Rodgers for McCarthy if Rodgers wanted to come to Minnesota.
Well, in the name of quarterback development that, has come up so often lately, especially after the Anthony Richardson debacle, I mean, I think, it's one of those things where you just have to just, do your thing. And I don't know.
Yesterday, Joe Flacco met with the Steelers. The former Browns and Ravens QB met with the Steelers. I think the Steelers, if they can't get Rodgers for $25 million, I think they're going to sign Flacco and then get another QB in the draft. And then they'll have Flacco and Mason Rudolph as their QB1 and QB2. It's not ideal, but if they don't want to pay Rodgers $40 million, I'm pretty sure that's what they're going to do, William, because you can't go into this year with Mason Rudolph as your QB1 and no backup plan.
No.
So,
and that's 100%, man. And some of the people watching, so many of the young fans don't remember, like right before Cam Newton, 12, 15 years ago, all quarterbacks sat, they sat and they got developed, Aaron Rodgers sat for 4 years, before he finally started or something like that.
Yeah, Jordan Love, same thing, 3-4 years. Yeah. That's pretty much the same with Rodgers. So, yeah. And Tracy agrees with you on McCarthy. He needs more development. But, yeah, as far as the Steelers go, I believe they will get a quarterback in the 3rd round. They'll go best player at 21, best player on their board at 21. They will get their QB in the 3rd round. And if their QBs are gone by the 3rd round, maybe they'll reach for Dylan Gabriel or a guy I have a day 3 grade on. But I think they're going to get their QB in the 3rd round. Draft a QB in the 1st round when you host the draft next year. You're probably going to be picking them higher than 20 shot at Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Aller, whoever, Nico Imaleva, whoever declares for next year's draft. You get your pick of the litter if you have a bad season with the QBs you have.
Yeah. Or you could just.
And I'm not saying the Steelers should go into a rebuild, but if you did do a rebuild, it would be a 1 to 2 year rebuild if you got the right QB, because you still have a lot of good defensive players on this roster, even though they're getting older.
Well, there's teams in this league that develop quarterbacks, that can develop quarterbacks, and there's, teams where quarterbacks go to die, and it's just that simple. Obviously we've talked about a few of them, between Cleveland and, actually the Steelers haven't, really done much, since Roethlisberger or before Roethlisberger, and I mean, but he was picked at what, number 11, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, man, I mean, and you have to pick the right guy, you mentioned Tyler Shrug,
Yeah.
and Tyler is actually has a pretty high ceiling, I mean, he can sling the ball and he can run it too. And he's a big dude, he's 6'4", 6'5", like what, 230, 235, somewhere in
Yeah.
those words, and he is an intriguing quarterback, and I figure from what I've seen, it would be late third or early fourth round pick, and that's getting into what I would say, almost starter, potential. And, I usually save, the first and the second round for starters right off, and then third, fourth, and fifth for backups. And after that, you're pretty much, not much, but
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a few guys, like with Dylan Gabriel, I actually have a ceiling grade of 93 out of 99, but my floor grade for Gabriel is a 63 out of 99. And anything below a 70 is a warm body.
yeah.
So he's got the floor of a warm body, but he's got higher upside than Cam Ward, but he's got a lower floor than Shadur. So what does that tell you about Dylan Gabriel? Gabriel could be a steal, but he also could. There's also I'd say there's a 70, maybe an 80% probability he's a backup with his floor.
Oh, I feel that he can play and that he is a backup, or could be.
20% probability you get a starter, 10% probability you get an above average starter, 5% probability you get a Pro Bowler. But there is that 1 in 20 probability you get a Pro Bowler, but it's not a good probability. It's not a probability to hedge your bets on. It's like taking all of your chips at the craps table and betting them on the number 24 instead of betting them on all black or all red. You're basically going to the roulette table and you're betting all your chips on one number, 24, or whatever number you want to bet all your chips on at the roulette table.
And
if you draft Dylan Gabriel, it's like betting all your chips if you're betting on Gabriel to become a Pro Bowler, you're basically taking all your chips at the roulette table and betting them on one number. That is not smart. It can work out in your favor if you develop him correctly, but there's only a 5% probability he reaches the ceiling.
Yeah. The problem I have with him is arm strength and, pushing the ball downfield. He's kind of he doesn't have a strong arm as some of these guys, kind of a Taylor Heineke kind of quarterback. I don't know. Taylor Heineke had unbelievable fire for all his, physical limitations. And that's Dylan Gabriel. He did well, but he started out, not so hot where he was. And I wasn't a fan when I saw him at UCF, and like I said, I just see him, as kind of having the ceiling of a backup and, the floor of kind of kick rocks, and it's nothing against him. It's just, there's so many, like I said, physical limitations with him,
Yeah.
So, but that's how I feel about.
All right.
That's how I feel about.
I'm into these Elite 8 games. I know Tracy's been waiting for me to talk about the Elite 8, so I'm going to get into that while you get a drink, get a cigarette, get whatever you need to get whatever resources you need to get.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to get into these Elite 8 games. I'm going to start with the first game airing at 6 today. It is the Texas Tech Red Raiders versus the Florida Gators for a trip to the Final Four. As much as I did pick Texas Tech to go to the Elite 8, but I was stupid enough to change my Final Four pick from Florida to Colorado State. That backfired massively. And as much as I like Texas Tech, they trailed Arkansas by double digits and needed overtime to beat the Razorbacks. I don't think as good as Texas Tech is, they have one star player in JT Toppin, the younger brother of Obi Toppin. They also have Darian Williams at small forward. So they have a power forward and a small forward that can control the tempo of this game. But the Florida Gators, with Walter Clayton Jr. at point guard, and they've got a center, I believe, and they've got a power forward. Their power forward has moved into the first round. Alex Condon, 6'11", 230. He's only a sophomore, but he can play power forward and center, but he's mainly a power forward. Florida has another center who's a senior. So the Florida Gators, I just think not only are they the more experienced team, I just think they're the better team on paper. And Manuel Watson, who's predicted the last three Final Four winners correctly, had Florida beating Duke in the championship of his bracket. And Florida, I just think, has too much working for them. I like the Gators in this one. I'm going to pick the Gators to win by 7, 70-63. I think the Gators are going to be the first team to secure a spot in the Final Four. And it's nothing against Texas Tech. I just think the Florida Gators are a better team. And they won the SEC tournament, and the SEC has 4 teams in the Elite Eight, including number 1 seed Auburn, Alabama, and Tennessee. And the crazy part is, William, if all 4 SEC teams win in the Elite Eight, this would be the first Final Four where 4 Final Four teams are all in the same conference, which is insane. That is insane.
Yeah, for real.
That all of the Final Four teams would be from the SEC.
Yeah.
And look, NIL is killing the parity in sports. I mean, yes, there's still upsets in men's hockey and men's soccer, but NIL is not big in those sports. So if you want to watch a feel-good story or an underdog pull the upset, you're going to have to start watching college soccer or college hockey. I mean, Vermont Catamounts weren't even one of the top 16 seeds, and they won the whole College Cup. They beat Marshall. I even picked them to beat Marshall, who won the 2020 College Cup, as underdogs because Vermont had more MLS prospects on their team.
Yeah.
That was why I picked Vermont. But, in hockey, 2 of the top 3 teams, Michigan State and Maine, got eliminated from the college hockey tournament, where only 16 teams make the college hockey postseason. So, and the only teams that are ranked are the teams in the top 4. So if 2 of the top 4 are eliminated and Boston College number 1 seeds playing Denver, I mean, yeah, there is some NIL action in college hockey, but it's not as big as the NIL action in football, basketball, or even college baseball, because you are seeing these SEC teams dominate in football, they are dominating in baseball, and they're dominating in basketball to the point where I think you can make the argument, William, that the SEC's done better in baseball and basketball than football as of late. And we've talked about the SEC underperforming on under the bleachers in football. But I would argue the SEC's been outperforming. The SEC has done a better job recruiting talent in baseball and basketball with their NIL money than they have in football.
Yeah, and that's one thing about, NIL. They really have to figure things out, and a salary cap is one of those things that would definitely keep things, interesting, compared to some of these teams coming out and, always having Georgia win, always having Alabama win, always.
I mean, are we gonna get a good feel-good story in football, baseball, or basketball where an underdog like the Vermont Catamounts wins the College Cup in men's college soccer? Are we gonna get that in this decade?
Man.
Probably not. Yeah. Probably not. With NIL, I would say no.
Yeah, for real, man.
I wish I was wrong, because I love watching those stories. Like George Mason getting the Final Four in 2006, 20 years ago, was a great story. Or just not getting that in the NIL era. It's not happening.
Yeah.
As much as I'd like to see it happen, it's not happening.
I remember that back in the day, man. We had March Madness brackets in like the 7th or 8th grade or something. And who was it? Like Santa Clara or something. And I actually had them, and they ended up, I can't remember how far they ended up going, but they were like a 15 seed or something, And
Virginia Commonwealth also got in the Final Four as like a 10 or 11 seed back in the day too, with Shaka Smart.
Mm-hmm.
Tracy's got Texas Tech beating Florida. You want to make a case for Texas Tech over Florida? Who do you like in this one?
I'm going to take the underdog. I like those feel good stories, So I definitely think I'll take Texas Tech. Just to throw something out there, and
Tracy asks, has NIL money changed the dynamics of college sports with players entering the transfer portals? Yes. That is a yes. You could say that's a yeah, like Rick James on the Chappelle Show.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go that far. But yeah, NIL has changed the dynamics of college sports.
For real, man.
College football has turned into hypergamy. I know a lot of red pill YouTube channels use the word hypergamy to describe relationships, to describe how certain genders want the bigger, better deal. I'm not playing the sex game. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to name those genders. It's not appropriate. But hypergamy applies in dating, and unfortunately, it applies in college football now with the portal. And it's not going away, no matter how much these coaches and athletic directors want it to go away. It's not going away.
Yeah, and when you have Dave Portnoy
control the narrative with players for years, and now players get to control their own narrative. It's here to stay, but there have to be regulations on how it's handled.
Yeah,
and
it's like having Dave Portnoy, come in there and throw out $5 million or whatever he did towards getting Bryce Underwood to Michigan, buying
just throwing gold coins at Bryce Underwood like Scrooge McDuck until he decommits from LSU and enrolls at Michigan. That's basically
he's stuck for a minute. A short minute.
Yeah, just put a Scrooge McDuck shirt on Dave Portnoy, and that's pretty much how Bryce Underwood rolled at Michigan. I don't know what the hell is wrong with me. I'm comparing Dave Portnoy to Scrooge McDuck. His pizza videos are actually entertaining.
Yeah, shit happens.
Yeah, all right. The next game is Duke, Alabama. This is a very entertaining game. Duke is won by the biggest point margin in college basketball. They have the best player in Cooper Flagg. We've got a Cooper Flagg thumbnail. And Duke's just loaded with NBA draft prospects. They've got the most NBA prospects of any team in the tournament. And Alabama, though, the reason why Alabama might win, they averaged more points per game than Duke in this tournament, number one. They do have some NBA prospects like Duke. They have a coach in Nate Oates who made the Final Four last year. Nate Oates has one Final Four on his resume. John Shire has 0. Alabama's played tougher opponents than Duke. Also, Alabama made a record 25 three-pointers against BYU. Duke beat Arizona, but they only beat Arizona by like 7 to 9 points. And they played a good Arizona team. And for Arizona and BYU, I want to quickly get this out of the way before we get to Duke, Alabama. Arizona's going to get LeBron's son in the number 9 recruit in the country next year. So you have nothing to be ashamed of. You're going to be back next year. Arizona could be a dark horse to make the Final Four. And AJ Dibansa, the number 1 recruit in high school basketball, has committed to BYU. So if Igor Demin, who you, me, and Joey all agree is a top 10 pick in the NBA draft, right now he's being mocked to the Dallas Mavericks at 13. If Igor Demin's falling out of the top 10, he could go back to school, have a dominant year with AJ Dibansa. They're probably an Elite 8, maybe a Final Four team with Dibansa and Demin. With one, they're just a Sweet 16 team again. But with both, I think they're an Elite 8, maybe a Final Four team. And BYU could have a very good year next year if Demin goes back, and maybe he plays his way into the top 5 as a sophomore. We've seen stranger things happen, William. So,
for sure.
And BYU, Arizona, I think both those teams could be in the Final Four next year. So they have nothing to be ashamed of in losing to the 2 best teams.
No.
I agree. Duke does have a deeper bench. Duke has Cameron Boozer coming on campus next year to replace Cooper Flagg, the son of Carlos Boozer. But I'll stick with the Duke team this year. But Alabama's the better 3-point team, and they've got the coach who's made the Final Four. I am taking Duke, but I think whoever wins this game is probably going to be playing in the championship against, I don't know, we'll see. Maybe Auburn, maybe Florida. But I think whoever wins this game is probably going to beat the Houston, Tennessee winner. And we'll get to Houston, Tennessee in a second, but I want to get William's thoughts on this game because Tracy's made some great points. He took Alabama to win, but he does think Duke has the deeper bench. But Alabama plays at such a fast tempo, and they made 25 3-pointers against BYU. If they bring that energy to the table, they might beat Duke, even though Duke has more NBA players.
Yeah, you know, Duke is definitely a perennial. You know, that's just going back in time, and that goes back to the 7th and 8th grade too, because Duke ended up winning me a box of candy bars. that was
Yeah,
about the
I
best thing
almost won
possible,
a
man.
college bracket when I was 8 years old. I had a perfect bracket up until the final round. But another guy did too at my dad's restaurant. He picked Connecticut in 99. I picked Duke. And that guy ended up winning the bracket in 99. Screwed me out of $100. That
Yeah.
was still my best bracket to date. I have not had a bracket come close to that bracket all these years later. And I think the year Williams referring to is 2001 when Duke had Shane Battier. I'm guessing that is when you were in 7th grade because I was in 7th grade in 2003, 2004.
Oh,
So
I'm going back
I'm
to
33.
Christian Leitner and that too.
The 90s.
Yeah,
That was when Coach K really began to turn Duke into a
yeah,
powerhouse. Yeah.
yeah. Duke just came alive, man, and it watched it right before my eyes. I mean, that's the whole reason, you know. I started under the bleachers was, you know, we got into the 12-team brackets in college football, and that was one of those things. It was like, hey, man, we can do the same thing with college football now, you know, and
Well, every college sport is brackets now, William.
yeah,
I mean, college hockey's had the 16-team playoff for years. College Cup and college soccer, there's 64 teams in women's soccer, but 48 in men's. And then with the College World Series, I believe there's 32 teams, but there's 8 brackets with 4 teams in them, and then you have the round robin, and then the top 2 teams go to the super regionals, and then they have a best of 3 series, and then the 8 best teams from the super regionals go to Omaha for the College World Series.
yeah,
So
it definitely adds
I
a
didn't have
great
a
thing,
perfect
man.
bracket in 2013.
You know, and
I didn't. No, I may have had a perfect bracket in 1998, but I was a kid. I was 8 years old, and I don't even remember who I picked. I know I had Connecticut losing to Duke, and Duke beat Connecticut, but that's the closest I came to a perfect bracket as an 8-year-old
oh, that's
in
about the time
'98.
Kerry Kittle
I have
was
not had
with
a perfect bracket since then, Tracy. But yeah, I didn't have a perfect bracket in 2013. If you heard me say that, that is not true. I did not. So just clarifying that.
yeah.
So
That
yeah.
goes back to those days of Kerry Kittle at Villanova. I remember that. That was 2000, 2001, somewhere in that area, ish.
But yeah,
I don't know. My
I
memory
think Duke.
sucks.
Who do you like between Duke and Alabama? We'll get to Houston, Tennessee in a second, but
I like Duke, man. You know, Alabama, if they play at the pace that you're talking about, you know, and they do something like, you know, stick, you know, 25 3-pointers again, you know, that's going to be hard to beat. But, you know, I do like Coach K, and I do like, you know, I've just always liked Duke. So I've
and
got to go
John
that
Shire's
direction.
due to get Duke to the Final Four as Coach K's successor.
Yeah.
That's the other thing you got to realize.
Yep.
But I think whoever wins this game has a good chance of beating Tennessee or Houston
Yep.
in the Final Four.
Yeah.
Because I think these are the 2 best teams in the right side of the brackets.
Yep.
I think these are the 2 best teams in the right side. And if Alabama was in the other bracket with Houston, I'd probably be picking them over Houston, but they're not. They got put in the same bracket as Duke. Houston and Tennessee, I honestly don't know. I picked Houston to lose in the round of 32 because this is the first Houston Cougars team I've seen in a while that does not have an NBA player in the top 60. And Tennessee, I think Tennessee's going to win this game. I completely screwed this bracket up. I took Illinois to make the Final Four. You kind of talked me into it when you talked about Jaku Sionis a few weeks ago, but Kentucky just wiped the floor with Illinois in the round of 32. and Tennessee handled Kentucky pretty easily. But, there's not a player on Houston in the top 60 of the NBA draft this year, which is nuts. And Tennessee's got a second-round player in – trying to look up. I might be a late first, but I know they've got either a late first or a second. I'm trying to get the name, get some research here. It's either a late first or a second, but I am doing my best to get the name and get the information correct because I don't want to mispronounce the name or get any data wrong. It's
I
probably
definitely
a
like
second.
Tennessee in this one, man, for sure.
It's Chaz Lanier, the shooting guard. But Chaz Lanier's not even their best player. They have another guy that a lot of people like on Tennessee. Chaz Spanier is a good shooting guard, but there's another player on Tennessee that is really good that a lot of people like.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one.
So I don't know. I'm looking up the name Zakai Zegler. So Tennessee's got Zakai Zegler at point guard, who a lot of people on Tennessee have hyped up the last 2 years, but he's not listed in any of the NBA mock drafts. Chaz Lanier, the senior shooting guard, is though. But Lanier and Zegler at point guard and shooting guard are both great in their own right. I don't think Houston has an answer for those two. I think the Tennessee Volunteers, after losing to Purdue in a heartbreaker and Zach Edey last year, I think the Vols, it's their time to go to San Antonio for the Final Four. And I think the Vols are probably going to be playing Duke next Saturday because that's the early game on Sunday on CBS. The other two games are on TBS tonight, but I think Tennessee is going to head the Tennessee men's basketball team. They're going to be heading to the Final Four in San Antonio. They're going to take on Duke. That's probably what we'll see. In the final game, we both have Tennessee. The final basketball game here is Michigan State versus Auburn. Michigan State, Jace Richardson frickin' crushed it for Michigan State last night. 20 points against Ole Miss. I mean, Jace Richardson wasn't even in the top 60 at the beginning of this tournament. He's now listed at 12th on Tankathon. He was not even in the first two rounds at the beginning of this tournament. He's now at 12. Jace Richardson has dominated this tournament, and he's only a freshman. That's the scary thing. Like, this is a guy that was supposed to come back, but because he's been so dominant in the tournament, he's now a lottery pick in the NBA draft. And Jace Richardson, he's going to have to carry Michigan State if they want to get to San Antonio because Auburn, they were the number one team in the country, number one overall seed despite losing early in the SEC tournament. And I mean, Auburn's in a tough spot here because Johnny Broome at power forward / center, Auburn's best player. He's a big. I think this game comes down to the two star players, Johnny Broome for Auburn and probably Jace Richardson for Michigan State. Which one of those guys can make a bigger impact? I'm going to go with Auburn. I had Duke over Auburn at the beginning of this tournament, William. A lot of people I know picked Duke in their brackets, except for Emmanuel. He took Florida over Duke. But, I'm going to go with Auburn over Michigan State. As good as Michigan State was, they barely beat Ole Miss. And I think that's going to come out to as good as Tom Izzo is. He's great. I mean, this Michigan State team, I thought they were going to lose very early in the tournament, but Izzo's coaching adjustments and Jace Richardson really stepping up for Michigan State is a big reason why they're in the Elite Eight. And as bold as this sounds, I think Jace Richardson's had the best freshman season in college basketball since Carmelo Anthony in 2003. I know that take is going to get some backlash, and rightfully so. It should get some backlash because Carmelo was just a special athlete, special player. Won the championship as a freshman, and Jim Boeheim thinks Cooper Flagg, Duke's freshman power forward, is better than Carmelo. So,
that's a lot to say.
Yeah.
The only problem with Carmelo, he was a great offensive player. It was just his defense, and I mean, so it's one of those things. And as for Auburn versus Michigan State, I've got to go with the Big Ten. Michigan State. I've just got to do it. I feel that I have to. So
I mean,
we'll go with
SEC
that.
matchups rarely happen in the tournament. Conference matchups
Yeah.
rarely happen in the Final Four. I know we were lucky enough to get North Carolina Duke a few years ago when Hubert Davis went up against Coach K in his final game. But I did not know Jace Richardson's the son of Jason Richardson. Now, Jackson Richardson is also the son of Jason Richardson, and Jackson Richardson's a 4 or 5-star recruit in the class of 2026. He is a top 10 pick in the 2027 NBA draft. So right now, I'm not projecting that far out. I'm just reading mock drafts on NBA Draft Room, and NBA Draft Room has Jackson Richardson in their top 10 for 2027. I did not know Jace Richardson was his older brother. That is a very good nugget, Tracy, and that is very much appreciated because that is going to help William and myself further when we have to scout Jackson a few years from now. So that is a very good nugget on Jace. That's very appreciated. So William's taking Michigan State, Florida, Duke, and Tennessee. I am taking Duke, Auburn, Florida, and Tennessee to beat Houston. One seed has to lose. I think it's going to be Houston, but both Rick Barnes and Kelvin Sampson are overdue for a Final Four appearance, regardless of how that game plays out on Sunday. All right, we got the college basketball out of the way. I am going to jump into the mock draft. I'm going to text Joey.
Friday night out.
Yeah, so mock drafts, I'm just improvising here. I'm not going to post a write-up to Draft Utopia because, A, the write-ups have not been updated. I will update them, but I'm working on a lot of stuff for the site. I've told William about this off the air because there's the OHL drafts in 13 days, and after we get that set up, I'm going to focus my attention on the 1-round WNBA mock, and then I'm going to put together the 7-round NFL mock and set up the draft results page for the WNBA draft, which is the second Monday in April. And the NFL draft is always the third Thursday in April, sometimes the fourth Thursday in April. It depends on how the calendar is. But, we got to prepare for all of those events. So basically, my break for coding is over, but I got everything I wanted to get done for the most part. But, 2025 WNBA draft. Paige Buchers is going number 1. The Connecticut point guard, Paige Buchers, she's been the number 1 player throughout this draft process. She probably would have been number 2 behind Caitlin Clark last year, but she chose to return to Connecticut. And she's going to be the number 1 player in the WNBA draft. That is not even debatable. That's probably the most obvious thing out there right now. And the Seattle Storm ended up with the number 2 pick. It's funny, at the beginning of I'll pull up USA Today's mock draft. I'll react to it. I'm not going to screen share it, but I'll pull it up and read it, react to it. Paige Buchers to the Dallas Wings. I agree with that. I've had Buchers at number 1. I think every mock draft in the country has had Paige buckets at number 1 since the start of the process because she was supposed to go number 2 behind Clark. Olivia Miles, Notre Dame point guard. Olivia Miles for Notre Dame was my number 2 player at the beginning of the process. There were people that had Kiki Irefin at number 2, but Olivia Miles has just impressed me more on film. And if you want to watch Olivia Miles, she's playing TCU at 1 p.m. I think with Joelle Lloyd being traded, because remember, LA Sparks originally owned this number 2 pick, but Storm, Las Vegas Aces, and the LA Sparks had a 3-team trade. The Las Vegas Aces sent Kelsey Plum, the former wife of Darren Waller and the WNBA All-Star for the 2-time champion Las Vegas Aces, to the LA Sparks. The Seattle Storm sent their best point guard, Joelle Lloyd, to the Las Vegas Aces. But they got the number 2 pick that the LA Sparks owned in this 3-team trade, and the Sparks moved down to number 9 in the draft, where the Storm do have 5 guards in their roster. It's possible they won't draft Miles, but they traded their starting point guard, Joel. I would think they would just draft another Notre Dame point guard and Olivia Miles and reload. So Kiki Irafin's listed as the pick for the Washington Mystics. I mean, I've had Irafin at number 5. But again, Sonia Citron could go 4th to the Washington Mystics too, because the Mystics now have number 3 and number 4. They've got number 3 and number 4 in this draft. Sonia Citron's the shooting guard on Notre Dame. I believe she will go 3rd. But, Citron, I'll pull up some stuff here in a bit. Okay, we got Joey on the line. I'm going through the WNBA mock draft here. I think the first 2 picks are still the same as earlier in the year. I think we're going to see Paige Buchers to the Dallas Wings. Now, the LA Sparks traded number 2 to the Seattle Storm. The Storm, Sparks, and Las Vegas Aces had a 3-team trade. Kelsey Plum leaves the Aces to go to the Sparks. Joelle Lloyd, the star point guard on the Seattle Storm, who took over for Sue Bird, won 2 WNBA titles with Breanna Stewart, goes to the Las Vegas Aces, and the Storm now pick at number 2 instead of the Sparks. So I think Olivia Miles, the Notre Dame point guard that I mocked the Sparks at 2, now ends up on the Storm. So I think those first 2 picks are pretty much set in stone. Nothing's changed. I remember at the beginning of the year, some had Kiki Irafin, the USC power forward, at 2, but Seattle, with them trading their star point guard, former number 1 pick, to the Aces, I would think, and with Kelsey Plum now on the Sparks, I would think the Storm are taking Paige Buchers and Olivia Miles are probably going to go 1 and 2. That we knew that back in when the lottery first came out. It's just the draft order changed it to. That's really the only major change. But what do you think of this so far? Do you think? Just curious what you think of that before, because we're going to do an NFL mock 1 round at the end. But I'm doing the WNBA mock first because the WNBA draft is the second Monday in April, about 9 days before the NFL draft. So we haven't really done a second WNBA mock since back in November, December, whenever the lottery came out. I just wanted to get that out of the way now before we get in the NFL mock. There's only 12 teams. I'm not going to do the second round. We're only going to do the top 12 again. But what do you think of the situation here with, you think the top 2 remain the same with Buchers and Miles at 1 and 2?
It's the top.
I was asking Joey, but if you want to provide input while he gathers his thoughts, that's cool. Number 3 is kind of a logjam because the Chicago Sky had number 3 at the beginning of the year, but they traded that first round pick to the Washington Mystics. So the Mystics now have 3 and 4, and Anissa Morrow, who I mocked at 3, suffered a season-ending injury. I had Olivia Pollard, a small forward out of Santa Clara, at 4. She's not listed in any of the mocks, but the Mystics have 3 and 4 now. I do think Sonia Citron's probably going to go 3rd. And then, but it's wide open at number 3 with the injury to Anissa Morrow, Anissa Morrow, the LSU small forward, was LSU's star player. She suffered a season-ending injury, but they made the Elite 8 without her. I think number 3 is wide open for the Mystics, but I would lean toward Sonia. I would lean towards Sonia Citron at 3, the Mystics, and then I think anything could happen after that. But I would say Irafin and Citron probably go 3 and 4. So I can't really argue with USA Today's mock draft dropping to 5 because of the season-ending injury. And I think Anissa Morrow would be a steal for an expansion team like the Golden State Valkyries. They need all the star power they can get. And I think you can make an argument that Morrow is the 3rd best player. The reason I mocked Morrow to the Chicago Sky at the beginning of the year was because her chemistry with Angel Reese would be through the roof. And I feel like that's a player Angel Reese would want to mentor. Cheyenne Sellers, a player Joey told me about, has moved all the way up to number 6 where the Washington Mystics pick. So the Mystics have 3 picks in the top 6. They should be trying to get Paige Buchers. If I'm Dallas, I'm moving number one if the Mystics would give me 3, 4, and 6. I know Paige Buchers is good, but I don't think she's Caitlin Clark good. She's the best player in the draft, but
I would give you that because I am a fan Paige Buchers, but let's face it, if you're looking for the player in this draft with the most upside, with the best pedigree, with the best chance of being a superstar, we're looking at Sellers, the daughter of Brad Sellers, former Chicago Bulls player. He played several seasons in the NBA. One of the Michael Jordan's best teammates, as invented by Jordan. And you are looking at a player with as much potential, upstart, and aggressive nature as anybody. And right now, you give her a platform, you give her professional coaching. Look, I love Paige Buchers, but bottom line is, Sellers may be the best player in this draft.
and that's why if you're the Dallas Wings, you make a trade with the Mystics, because if they give you 3, 4, and 6, you're probably going to get Sellers at 3. You could get Sellers at 3 because I think Olivia Miles is locked into number 2. You give me 3 and 6. I don't even need 4. You give me 3 and 6 or 3. You give me 3 and 6. I can get Sonia Citron at 3 and I can get Cheyenne Sellers at 6. So if you give me 3 and 4 or 6, I think I would move down because I like Paige Buchers, but would you rather have Sonia Citron at shooting guard and Sellers at point guard, or would you rather have Buchers at 1? If you'd rather have Buchers at 1 and Arik Ogunbowale, the shooting guard on the Dallas Wings, is a superstar, averages 20 points a game. She's great.
Look at the overall game. Look at the overall game. Best interior player, Sellers. Best passer, Sellers. One of the leading scorers. I think she is now the leading scorer in Maryland history for female basketball.
And what's disappointing is she's considered the 3rd best point guard in the draft. Miles and Buchers are considered higher than her.
Here's the thing, Chris. You know who the top scorer is in the history of Maryland basketball, male or female? So that, Brad Sellers. Guess who's second? Her. And you're telling me
Olivia Miles has a field goal per. She has a. Olivia Miles is a steal on 50% shooting from 3. So I mean, Miles.
best rebounding guard in this draft.
I'm arguing Sellers. I just think she's probably going to be the 3rd point guard draft.
She should be the first. And all things considered, she should be looking at Paige Buchers.
And Olivia Miles probably going 1. And those point guards are locked in.
You're looking at national champions, people who have been in the spotlight. Guess who's going to be first? The people that would get you on national TV and get you the ad revenue. That's who's going to be first. Because WNBA, as far as they're coming, still on that point, they have to promote the people that are going to get the ad revenue. And guess what? That ain't the best player this year. In years past, it's been the best player. This year, it ain't. Because Sellers is the best player you can draft right now. She ain't gonna get
But it's a very deep point guard draft. I would say there's 5 or 6 first-round point guards. Tihaina Papawo of South Carolina defended Cheyenne Sellers really well. And South Carolina knocked out Maryland last night in the women's tournament. Tihaina Papawo has mocked the LA Sparks at 9 as the point guard they would get for the future, and they would ease her in. And Georgia Amore, a Kentucky point guard that I mocked. I mocked Georgia Amore ahead of Cheyenne Sellers at the beginning of the year, but the medicals with Amore are more serious than I realized. But she did stay healthy this year, to her credit, and I do like Amore. She's being mocked the Sky at 10 as a backup to Vandersloot, where she can be developed. Courtney Vandersloot, the Liberty point guard, signed with the Sky. So I do like that move for the Chicago Sky, and getting Amore to be her backup would be a great move. That would be a great move.
Okay, she is probably the best defensive point guard in this draft. She may be the best defensive point guard in the last 2 drafts. But that's not going to get you a top 3 pick. You got to have other things. But I do agree with her being top 9, top 10 in this draft. She's just good enough offensively that she's gonna.
So
She's
5 of the top 10 picks this year are point guards, Joey, with Tihaina Papau, Cheyenne Sellers, Georgia Amore, Olivia Miles, and Paige Buchers. 5 of the top 10 picks are point guards. When I messaged John Vogel the deepest positions in each draft class, I said the point guard's the deepest position in the WNBA draft. And with 5 in the top 10, that cannot be argued or disputed. And Haley Van Lith, the TCU point guard, is playing Notre Dame at 1 today. So we're going to get to see Olivia Miles, Sonia Citron, the Notre Dame shooting guard, and Haley Van Lith at 1 p.m. And Van Lith was on LSU with Angel Reese, ended up doing really bad at LSU, transferred to Louisville, struggled there, and now she's on TCU, and she's thrived with TCU. She did better at Louisville than she did with LSU, but, she's thrived with the TCU basketball program. So, those are just some of the players in the WNBA draft in the top 12, and Sundell got mocked at number 12. But, I don't think this WNBA, I don't know. Because I remember a few years ago when we were talking about the 2024 draft, you thought the WNBA draft in 25 would be deeper, but that was largely due to Sellers. There's other really good players in this class, though. I'll look at the updated mock on Tankathon, see what they did. So they've got the same top 3 as me. Buchers, Miles, Cintron, Dominique Malonga, the France center to the Mystics at 4. Kiki Irefin at 5. Cheyenne Sellers at 6. I'm probably going to go Sellers at 4 behind Citron when I update my WNBA mock. Georgia Amore is 7th, even though she's 5'6" and she does have an injury history. Morrow fell to 8th, and Morrow suffered a season-ending injury. Averaged over 20 points a game, but she did suffer a season-ending injury. She's listed on the Connecticut Sun at 8. The Vegas Aces forfeited their first rounder. Chicago Sky get an international player. Sanyaya Rivers, the North Carolina State shooting guard, is at 11, and Michaela Timpson is listed on the Dallas Wings at 12 with the Liberty's first-round pick. Tihaina Papau is listed as a second-round pick to the Aces. That would be a steal if she dropped that far. I don't think she's going to drop out of the first round. Tihaina Papau. I don't think she's going to drop out of the first round, but this is Tankathon's mock. They have J.J. Quinterly in the second round. Quinterly averaged 23.4 points a game at West Virginia. I mocked her in the first round. I'm probably going to keep her there because I haven't really seen enough to where I want to move her down. Aoka Lee's averaging 30 points a game at Kansas State. I had Aoka Lee in the late first round. They have her at 23 to the Mystics. She's going to get picked higher than that. Maybe she goes in the second round instead of the first, but if she's averaging 30 points a game, that's a player you should strongly consider in the 10 through 12 range. I'm not saying she belongs in the top 8 or 9. Joey probably agrees with me on that. In the top 10 is too high, but in the 10 through 12 range, that's a player you take a flyer on if you need a center. Because I just can't ignore 30 points a game in basketball. I cannot ignore that, Joey. I'm sorry. I can't ignore that.
Nor should you. The big thing is, though, you have to look at, when I said I thought this was a deeper draft, I meant it, and I still mean it. Okay? this is a draft. Last year, you got to find with a lot of star power. This year, you're going to be fine. Find 4 or 5 stars and great people to fill the holes in rosters that are going to sit there and shine in their role. Okay, this is a deeper draft than last year. They don't have as many stars. Deeper. And,
Miles and Sellers are basically your guy. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the 3 those are your stars. Everybody else, amazing.
Sonia Citron, you could argue she's a star too, but I think you could also argue that she's averaging 20 points a game at Notre Dame. 20.3. Maybe on the lower end tier of stars, but I would put her in that category. If she was under 20 points a game, I think you could counter argue that.
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll adhere to that because you don't just score 20, 30 points a game in basketball because you can't play the game. Okay, sometimes it's for reasons like LeBron James. He can't shoot for crap, but he's physically gifted in the fact that if the Russians were smart, they would have developed time travel when they were trying to find their super soldiers, gone forward in time, taken a blood sample, and gone back and just called LeBron James a couple million times, and there you go. There's your research. LeBron's he's going to score 30 points a game simply because he's going to go down the lane and people are going to say, oh, crap. Like, there you go, sir. And that's what he did for 20 years. Okay. You score 30 points. Scoring 30 points is a skill. Doesn't matter if it's a natural skill. Doesn't matter if it's a talent skill. It's a skill. So you can't dismiss it. You may not like how it happens. If it's going to all-time rankings, might have a different all-time ranking. But you can't just say, well, guys, you will. That doesn't matter because whatever reason is that. Doesn't matter. You got to figure it out.
Yeah, I agree. And William, you got anything you want to add to this WNBA draft? I am gonna load up the NFL draft that I'm gonna do a one round mock, maybe a collaboration effort between William and Joey. I read the top 5 of Charlie Campbell's mock last night. I kind of agree with his top 5 to a degree, but I'm not sure I want to go that route yet. But Charlie, for his top 5, he has at 1, he has Cam Ward. He's got the Browns taking Carter at 2. My gut is telling me that the whole Browns thing with Carter is a smokescreen, a shit test like Will Anderson to the Texans at this point 2 years ago. Because remember, a lot of people had Anderson to the Texans at 2 in their mock drafts. And I said, guys, Texans still don't have their quarterback. They're not keeping the guy from Stanford. I forget his name. They're not keeping that guy as their starter. They're getting Stroud. Maybe they'll find a way to get Anderson too, and they did. They ended up trading up to 3. But, and a lot of people Anderson was the betting favorite to go number 2 until the day of the draft. Then Stroud flipped ahead of him and became the betting favorite by 3 p.m.
Here's the deal, okay? For anybody who doesn't know the NFL draft, the deal is Cam Ward's going to be a star, whether you like it or not. He's going to go number 1. He's the most physically talented quarterback in this draft.
I agree. Cam Ward's going to go number 1, but
He is being overlooked by the media. Why? Because the media has their dog. But if you look at it, every indication points to Shedeur Sanders. And here's the thing. If the Browns pass on another quarterback, for some random position that will not improve their team to the point of being able to make the playoffs. And
if you pass on a QB at 2, you have to trade for Cousins, and that hurts your salary cap. That hurts your salary cap.
Not necessarily. I've been looking into that.
No, Bill Sparks did an article last night. He was a Browns fan like you, and he did an article last night saying that trading for Cousins would hurt the Browns' salary cap, short term and long term. It would, but
it would because in a trade, I got 3 words for you. No trade clause. That's Kirk Cousins. That means if the Browns say the Falcons need to pay this amount, guess what's going to happen? The Falcons are going to pay that amount if they want to trade him to the Browns. Else it's not going to happen. And Kirk Cousins is going to be negotiating that. No trade clause. If what I've been hearing, it's going to be a $20 million to $17 million split. And guess what? And that's not just for the Browns. That's for any team he plays for. The Falcons are going to have to eat $20 million a year for the next 3 years.
well, Kirk Cousins, I think, is making $44 million this upcoming season. So
The Falcons are going to have to eat all the
or they can keep him on the roster as a backup if they don't want to trade him. That would be stupid, but they have that ability to do that if they do not want to move him.
But here's the thing. I heard earlier in the week, and I didn't get much attention to it, but I'm sure that the Falcons secretly gave Kirk Cousins silently the ability to seek a trade.
And he went to Cleveland this week and ate Chipotle. He went to Cleveland this week and ate Chipotle.
Yeah, and everybody says, well, isn't that tampering? No, not if the person he's meeting with is an old friend or not officially part of the Browns organization. So, no, that's exactly how he sounds talking. He went outside Atlanta and met with somebody who wasn't exactly part of that organization. And that's why he signed there so quickly.
I only think the Browns would take Carter if they traded for Cousins. If they do not trade for Cousins, they are taking Sanders at 2. That's kind of what the conclusion I've came to.
That's a logical conclusion, but it's not the one that we're looking at here in this situation because right now, as it stands, Jimmy Haslam, as we all know, he is very, very good at listening and doing what the last person I talked to said. He loves Cam Wood right now. Guess who his last meeting is with? Shedeur Sanders. That's the last one he's going to. Who do you think he's going to say?
And I think the exact scenario that happened with the Texans is going to happen with the Browns, by the way. I know we'll get to the Giants, we'll get to some of these other teams, but the day of the draft, Will Anderson was the betting favorite to go to the Texans at 2. And by 3 p.m. on draft day, Stroud overtook Will Anderson as the betting favorite to go second in the draft. I think that exact scenario is going to happen with Shedeur Sanders and Abdul Carter at 2 on draft day. I think that exact scenario is going to play out exactly like that, where the media says Carter's going second, and then on draft day, we're going to find out Shedeur is the betting favorite to go second. And it's going to be because Haslam met with Shedeur leading up to the draft. That and the Browns scouting department, their Southwest scout loved Shedeur, thought he'd be better than Burrow back in August. So that, Haslam and Barry all coming to a consensus on Shedeur.
Also, Stefanski loves Shedeur.
And Dion's basically said Shedeur can play wherever he wants. So any objections about the Browns drafting Shedeur have been put to bed for good.
And I will tell you why that happened. that happened directly after his former teammate, the quarterback that he told Jimmy Johnson put in because we want him to have his Super Bowl moment. Bill Musgrave, very good quarterback coach, by the way, pretty decent offensive mind, was promoted officially to quarterback coach. And it was right after that when Dion said, we're going to let God handle it. No, you're not going to let God handle it. You knew that the Browns were going to take Shedeur, and you were not going to protest because you knew your good friend, a guy that you love, your former teammate, was going to be coaching him, a guy you trusted. That's why you said we're leaving it in God's hands. No, you're not leaving it in God's hands. You're leaving it in Bill Musgrave. And you trust Bill Musgrave.
Yeah, and Pat Shurmur and Bill Musgrave ran very similar offensive schemes, not just in college, but in the pros. Pat Shurmur was Shadeur's offensive coordinator. Musgrave and...
That's what gets me, is that Dion knew where Shedeur was going to be going. But he wasn't going to say. But if you connect the dots, guess what? You can see it. But Dion knows exactly what's going to happen on draft day.
Yeah, Shedeur, I'm going to put Shedeur at 2 because this is a tough decision, Joey. I still think there's a chance the Browns go Carter, but I also feel like it's kind of a smokescreen because if Adam Schefter, Charlie Campbell, and Jake Trotter are all reporting the same intel, Carter's going to be the pick at 2. 9 times out of 10, that would be true, and you'd mock Carter the Browns. I think this is the rare exception where that is bullshit because the Browns have a greater need at quarterback. And we've connected the dots. Dating back to August when an AFC North team told ESPN's Jordan Reed in confidence that we believe Shedeur Sanders is going to be better than Joe Burrow. The Steelers do not have a Southwest area scout. They have Blisto scouts. The Browns Southwest area scout worked for Howie Roseman when they drafted Jalen Hurts. That's the giveaway. That's the tell. That and the fact that Jordan Reed mocked Shedeur Sanders to the Browns back in February after the Senior Bowl. That's the other tell.
Here's the thing. There is a chance Cam Ward would have been drafted ahead of Joe Burrow. But Cam Ward would have come out, during Joe Burrow's draft. But the thing is, if you're really looking at it, so I've gone through a lot of comparisons. Shedeur Sanders, his biggest comparison is Joe Burrow. Tough as nails, accurate as hell, not quite the arm talent, can run any offense, can see a defense before it materializes, can break down anything, play behind a shit offensive line in college. Then went to the pros. Guess what? There is your comparison. So, are the Browns going to, the question is, are the Browns going to take up on this year's version of Joe Burrow? Because I'm a huge fan of both Sanders and Burrow. But let's face facts. Look at it for what it is. Sanders is going to be a star. So is Cam Ward.
I think Sanders' ceiling is up. A lot of people are saying that Sanders' floor is higher than Ward's, but Ward's ceiling is higher. I think Sanders' ceiling is higher than Ward's, but Ward's floor is higher than Sanders. So it's a very interesting debate with these top 2 guys.
If you're looking at it for what it is, Shedeur has been in the spotlight since he was 2 years old. His father is Deion Sanders. His mentor and personal coach is Tom Brady. His offensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur. He turned around 2 programs in college football. he is ready to turn around an NFL program.
And he led his high school team to a state championship. I know this because I watched High School U on Tubi, and they did a documentary on Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and a high school quarterback in Texas. And the high school quarterback in Texas, they did a documentary on, lost the state title to a high school football team with Shadur Sanders at quarterback that was coached by Deion Sanders before he went to Jackson State.
So that makes me wonder, and I said this to G. Bush as I was ranting and raving through the old apartment not an hour ago. I said, what is your offense if you don't have a quarterback? The fact is, doesn't matter how much talent you have, you ain't got an offense. Like, you look around after Jameis Winston came in, before he came in, receivers were anemic. After he came in, all of a sudden they're coming. What? Oh, Jerry Judy's a star. Oh, wow, you have a quarterback that you give your receivers a chance? Oh, my God, I never would have noticed. Guess what? Got to get your quarterback. Got to get a quarterback that can give people a chance. And that's what Shadur does.
Yeah, I do have Shadur. I do have a second round grade on Shadur, but I have enough common sense and cognizant ability to realize he's going to go in the first round. He might go as early as 2. And after careful deliberation, I'm going to mock him at 2. The Giants at 3, William. I think this is Travis Hunter.
That's where we differ in draft grades. I've got a top 5 grade on Shadur.
I've got a top 7 grade on Cam Ward. I've got Cam Ward at 7, and I've got Shadur at 58 on my board. But those are the only 2 QBs I have in the first 2 rounds of this draft. I think it's a very watered-down draft after those 2.
And Shadur's top 5 picks, I think both would have gone either before or around where both went last year. So that's where we differ in.
I mean, I loved Shadur's tape in 2023, but 2024, I thought he did worse in some of the bigger games this year. But at the same token, he's the only QB in this draft that I've seen make all 6 progressions, but he's only done it twice. Once at Jackson State, once in a Colorado spring game. He didn't do it in a Colorado game during his 2 years on the campus. I don't know if that's because of the offense he ran or
the offensive line. It's at one point he had the worst offensive line in college football here.
So that's part of it.
You don't have time. Yeah, you don't have time to make 6 progressions. It's like, well, screw it.
Well, the Giants are either going to pick Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter at 3. They're going to bank on Wilson and Winston, but I'm going Hunter here, William, because it's very simple. The Giants have Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns at edge rusher. They just gave Burns an extension. If you draft Carter at 3, you are trading Thibodeau, period. And the Giants, they do have Deonte Banks at corner. Did they add anybody to complement him in free agency? I think they did, but it's not like a big name corner. I'll double check really quickly on my phone, but I think Travis Hunter is going to go 3rd.
I'd like to.
And William, tell me if you just, isn't Travis Hunter like the best prospect? He is a once-in-a-lifetime prospect. He played 90% of the snaps for Colorado. That is both offensive and defensive, and nobody else has ever done that. Even Charles Woodson never did that.
Yeah, the Giants did get another corner in free agency. They got Paulson Adebo, but I think Adebo's more of a number 2 than a number 1 corner, even though he showed the ability to play number 1 corner multiple years with the Saints when Lattimore was injured. I think he's more of a number 2 corner than a number 1 corner. And Hunter feels like a surefire number 1 corner. And if Hunter and Adebo are your 1 and 2 corners, you can move Deonte Banks to nickel, and I think he'd actually do better there.
Yeah, and a lot of people have.
I wanted to know from you, do you think because this is my feeling. The best, in my heart of hearts, Travis Hunter has the best ball skills of anybody I have seen in my lifetime. Do you agree with that? Offensive or defensive, doesn't matter.
Exactly agree with it, but I see Travis Hunter as an elite receiver, and I see him as go give me the ball kind of cornerback. Obviously, first round cornerbacks, you know, they make more money, they have a higher success rate than wide receivers. But like I said, what I saw was just an elite receiver. And like I said, the go give me the ball, you know, play whatever on defense, package, whatever, you know, because I mean, he obviously wants to. You might as well give him a chance at doing something. He's not going to play both ways like everyone or like he thinks, anyways, and like some people think. But you know, I definitely see him going to the New
Yeah.
York Giants. You know,
It's interesting because Charlie Campbell's top 5 was number 1 Cam Ward, number 2 Abdul Carter. He had Shadur going to the Giants at 3. He gave the Patriots Will Campbell at 4, and then Travis Hunter fell to the Jags at 5 in Charlie's mock. I don't think Hunter's falling to 5 in the mock drafts.
Chris, I agree with you.
And Charlie's one of the most accurate insiders in the industry, but this is one of those rare circumstances where I disagree with him from a talent evaluation standpoint.
I think there's a lot wrong with this draft when it comes to evaluation, because I think this year took a lot more evaluation than people were used to. And if you want really in-depth with being able to evaluate quickly, you are going to be a mess. And I think that's what's happening to a lot of these guys that are evaluating. That's why.
And I also feel like a lot of mock drafters are overthinking things this year, because at the beginning of the draft process back in January, Charlie Campbell had Abdul Carter, the Patriots, at 4, and he said, insiders from the Patriots have told Walter Football that the Patriots are very high on Abdul Carter. But then he changed his pick to Will Campbell. But in this scenario, Carter and Cam 4, since we all agree Hunter goes to the Giants at 3. So this is where things get interesting. I'm going to go Will Campbell here because of the medicals with Carter and the fact that left tackle is a greater need for the Patriots. But I could end up being wrong here, and the Patriots could end up taking Carter and sticking to their board. This feels like a 50-50 situation more than any of the teams in the top 5, Joey. The Giants, it feels like they're going Hunter.
I'm going to give Charlie Campbell credit here. Okay? He's not that freaking stupid. He's putting that out there because that's what was told. But he knows in his heart of hearts that's a bunch of bull crap, and you do not listen. I've known Charlie, even though we haven't talked in years. I've known Charlie 10 years. Okay? He ain't stupid. He ain't going to listen to all that crap. But what he will do, he will change his mock draft based on what he knows at the last moment. Because he knows how to get people to look at his stuff. But his analysis is usually correct. Okay? Here's the thing. He knows that everything that he's being told by teams is a bunch of bullshit. Because guess what? It's the time of the year where people sit down at the toilet with a cup under their ass, take a shit, and then hand it to people. Okay? And say, this is what we're doing. You can leave us right, and Charlie's smart enough that he's not going to fall for that crap. But, mark my words, 2 days before the draft, we're going to see a mock draft, and it's going to be like, oh, really?
Because right now, if I'm mocking the draft, I've got right now, my top four would be the quarterbacks at 1 and 2, Hunter at 3. Hunter's number 1 on my big board. Will Campbell is number 2 on my big board. So those two come off the board after the quarterbacks. That's my top 5. Now, the Jaguars are in an interesting spot because Abdul Carter is 3 on my board, but they have 2 good edge rushers in Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker. I think they were going to go Will Johnson. I've got Will Johnson, the Michigan corner, at 4 on my board. That is my pick for Jacksonville, but I will let you provide input on the Jaguars, Joey, because you're a resident of Jacksonville. I've got Mason Graham at 5 on my board, but I think they get a corner here. I think they're going to get a corner here at 5. It's just a hunch.
I'm looking at Mason Graham. I've heard a lot about the GM and his philosophy, about how he wants to control the interior book lines.
I'll give William the tiebreaker. Since Joey and I disagree, William gets the tiebreaker, but Joey, continue to make your case for Graham. I've made my case for Will Johnson. They need a corner. He's the best player on my board that's not a position of need for the Jaguars. It's not a very...
Graham is a big-time playmaker. That's something you guys haven't had in years. He is a big-time playmaker. He is a big-time run stuffer. He can push back the pile in the pass rush, big-time bull rush. He can disrupt, and as someone who's been to a handful of Gator last years, dude, they have not had anybody know that can stop anything up the middle. Because via pass rush or through run stopping.
My counter argument for a defensive tackle at 5 would be that they have 2 defensive tackles under contract, Eric Armstead and Devon Hamilton. And even if you think Graham is better than both, you only draft him if you're ready to cut one of those guys post June 1st, unless you can get out of one of those contracts without losing cap space. I don't think they can get out of either contract at this juncture. And that would be the case for Johnson.
Well, with Armstead, it's kind of interesting because I'm not 100% sure if they're switching defenses back to the 4-3, but he is back to the 3-4, but he is playing out of position all year.
Well, he played 43 defensive tackle in San Francisco, and the Jaguars moved to a 43 defense. So,
and for some reason, they played him at times at defensive end, which goes flabbergasted me. Because it's like maybe their defense coordinator at the time thought that, because one game I was at, I saw my defense and they're like, what are they doing? And because it doesn't make sense. So maybe it was a scheme pick. Maybe it was what they were trying to do to
keep making your case. I'm going to look up the contracts for Arik Armstead and Devon Hamilton before we let William break the tiebreaker. Because I know you're not done, so please continue.
Yeah, with Hamilton, I wasn't a huge proponent of the game. I didn't think Hamilton was that great.
I loved him on his rookie deal, but once they extended him, it just felt like he peaked. But, yes.
His last year on his rookie contract.
He played well the first 3 years, and then they extended him before his rookie deal was up, and ever since he's been on a downward spiral. But yeah, Arik Armstead, the Jaguars can get out of his contract in 2026. They would save $2.3 million against the cap pre-June 1st, and I'm guessing that number is significantly higher post-June 1st in 2026, because he has a dead cap of $17.1 million for 2026 if you cut him before free agency in 2026. But I'm guessing that number, that dead cap is significantly lower post June 1st, 2026.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm looking right now to find out what the number is.
That's one thing Trent Baalke was
14.5 million post June 1st, 2026. Armstead, they can't cut him this year, but if they can cut him next year post June 1st, and 14.5 million. That 14.5 million, that is the magic number, Joey. That is the trigger number. That is the for 14.5.
If you hit on Graham and you hit him at number 5 this year, if you can cut next year, that's going to
post June 1st. Post June 1st, save 14.5 million. 14.5.
Yes.
So
that will eliminate the need, because that will give you Graham at a lower premium. So when his salary says that's great, because we knock off another salary.
yeah, and this is the thing with Hamilton. You only save 4.3 if you cut him post June 1st this year, but if you cut him post June 1st next year, you save 8.4 million. But the 14.5 million with Armstead, that is the magic number I'm looking at. So, William, after reviewing the information Joey and I presented, you've got a case for Will Johnson, position of need, best player on my board. You got a case for Mason Graham. You have 2 decent defensive tackles on the roster, short term in Armstead and Hamilton, but Graham is an upgrade, I think, long term. And you can buy out one of them, Armstead, to save $14.5 million in 2026. After taking both information Joey and I presented you into account, what is your decision for number 5? You hold the tiebreaker, William.
They definitely have to go secondary. I feel that, I mean, Jacksonville doesn't exactly have, that much of a success rate either as a team for having so many high picks over the years. But, I mean, secondary has just become second to none when it comes to important positions on the field, and so many drafts, this is just kind of out there. I'll give that, mock drafts with either Will Campbell or Mason Graham fall into the 49ers, and I've kind of fallen in love with the fact of that. So one of them's got to. So I'm not going to use that for a reason, but I think they definitely have to go Will Johnson, dude.
Yeah. Raiders are in a tough spot at 6. I mean, a lot of betting sports books have Ashton Ginty going to the Raiders at 6. But the best player on my board is Abdul Carter. Oren hates Ashton Ginty. He doesn't hate him, but he thinks he's overhyped. And Carter is the best player on my board. But I'll go through the run because it's kind of hard. This is kind of a hard pick to make because I'll break down the depth chart for the Raiders. Raiders running back depth chart: Raheem Mostert, Sincere McCormick, Zamir White, Dylan Lobb. I do think Ginty's an upgrade over all 4 of those guys. But Oren does not like Ginty. Abdul Carter, he would probably start at right end over Malcolm Kuntz and Tyree Wilson. But the Raiders, they brought back Malcolm Kuntz. They signed Devin White to a 1-year deal. They added a Landon Roberts to replace Spillane. They added Jeremy Chin to replace Trevon Moehrig. Isaiah Polamalu is starting at free safety. He went undrafted. I do think the Raiders need a cornerback upgrade, but there's not a corner on the board. You have Jack Jones, Eric Stokes, DeCorian Bennett, DeCambrian Richardson. So you got some guys duking it out for nickel corner, but you can get a nickel corner in day 3. I honestly think Carter's an upgrade over Kuntz and Wilson. And if you draft Carter, you allow Kuntz and Wilson to be situational edge rushers to Crosby and Carter. Plus the duo of Crosby and Carter, that's enough to strike the fear of God into Patrick Mahomes. And if you're the Raiders, your goal is to strike the fear of God into Patrick Mahomes. Herbert, Bo Nix. That's your goal if you're the Raiders.
Yeah, and
because you need that specialty. So I vote for Abdul Carter at 6, not just because I want to make Oren happy, but because if Carter falls out of the top 5, somebody's got to pick him. And as much as I like Ashton Ginty, I just think Carter's a better fit for the Raiders at 6. Mason Graham's here too. I mean, right now, the Raiders have Jonah Lalulu, Adam Butler, who was big against the Browns, and Lakai Fotu at defensive tackle. So you could make a case for Mason Graham being that second guy next to Wilkins. I think this is a game of 3-card Monty. I don't think you can go wrong with Carter, Graham, or Ginty at 6, but I'm voting for Carter because I think the presence of Carter and Crosby and moving both Malcolm Kuntz and Tyree Wilson into backup edge rusher roles, it's just going to make the Raiders pass rush so much more difficult for the Justin Herberts and Patrick Mahomes to deal with.
There are so many good running backs.
And I love Ginty on the Raiders. I think it's a fantastic fit, even though Warren thinks Ginty's overhyped. But I just can't. I have to trust my board, and I think Carter's a better fit for the Raiders at 6.
I can agree with that.
As much as I love Ginty.
I can agree with that because, there are starting running backs that are going to be taken second, third round of this draft, and there are just so many good ones. For a running back, to be a first round pick, in my opinion, they have to be a superstar. Yeah, Ginty is a really, really good running back. And I mean, it would be an excellent fit with the Raiders. But like I said, Abdul Carter and Mason Graham, between those two, they're just too good not to pick one of them here. And that's just, it's just how it is, defensive end.
It is how it is.
Defensive tackle is
I think
just
Joe's in agreement with us on Carter at 6. Yeah. So
good to pass up.
So Carter's a Raider at 6. I mean, the Jets lost some pieces at defensive tackle. They lost Solomon Thomas. I think they lost Kinlaw as well. You get an interior player to complement Quinn Williams on the interior. And Quinn Williams, Mason Graham, that is a deadly 1-2 punch at defensive tackle. It's almost as deadly as the Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed cornerback duo, but you'd have Graham on a rookie deal. This move just makes a lot of sense. Mason Graham is 5 on my big board. So Mason Graham to the Jets at 7. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. Panthers at 8 are interesting. Number 1 player on my board is Ashton Ginty, but the Panthers, they have a lot of running backs. They have Jonathan Brooks. They gave Chuba Hubbard an extension. And they drafted Jonathan Brooks in the 2nd round, even though he's not going to play next year. I would draft Ginty, but I don't think the Panthers are going to pick him. And looking at the Panthers from a historical standpoint, the Panthers have drafted players out of the Southeast region dating back to 2020. All the players they drafted are from the Southeast area. Derek Brown, 2020, Auburn. J.C. Horn, South Carolina. Ike Ekwonu, North Carolina State. Bryce Young, Alabama. Xavier Legette, South Carolina. The Panthers, for some reason, love players in the Southeast region. The number 1 player in the Southeast on my board is... I'm not counting Missouri as a Southeast school. I know they got added to the SEC, William, but they are a Midwest school playing in the Southeast. Yeah. They are a Midwest school playing in the Southeastern Conference. They are not a true Southeastern college.
That is a really
They're a Midwest college that got added to the SEC. So as far as scouting goes, Missouri is an SEC school, but they are a Midwest regional school that got added to the best conference in college football. So I'm not counting them as a true Southeastern college.
Yeah, and
they could go Luther Burden or Membau. I don't think they go that route. The best true Southeast player on my board is Mikael Williams. There are some people that do have Jalen Walker ahead of him. James Pierce is the number 1 player on Draft Buzz's board that's from the Southeast region. And I know 3 of us are gonna disagree on this. So let's each pick a nominee and then try to come to a consensus. I'm going to nominate Mikael Williams, best Southeast player on my board, and he's an edge rusher. I'm going to go Mikael Williams out of Georgia. Joey, do you have a different player? I'm guessing you're going to pick Pierce. I could be wrong on that. You might have another guy in mind, but maybe pick Jalen Walker. I think Jalen Walker is probably the biggest bust among the players in the 1st round of this draft. Deserves Jalen Walker. The organization does not. Dan Morgan, Luke Kuechly does not deserve him, but Dave Tepper does. Dave Tepper deserves Jalen Walker. I don't think Jalen Walker's a first-round talent, but I've seen a lot of mock drafts put Jalen Walker at 8. So that's my response to that. Dave Tepper deserves Jalen Walker. Dan Morgan does not.
Well,
I'll leave it at that.
I'm going to go SEC and, or should I say Midwest, according to you. But I got to toss out Luther Burden there because
Who do you got, William?
Luther Burden. The Panthers need to give Bryce Young weapons. He needs weapons to succeed.
It sounds I'll turn the volume up. I got it volume up to max, but I'm going Mikael Williams, Georgia. I think Joey's going Pierce. And William,
Can you hear me?
I think Williams going Walker unless he's got another guy in mind.
I don't know if you can hear me. Is my audio off or something?
Audio is a little static, but I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going Luther Burden. The Panthers absolutely need to surround Bryce Young with weapons. He's just that kind of quarterback, and being able to succeed in this league. And they need more than just Xavier Legette and whoever else is there. I think Adam Thielen might have came back or I don't even know what happened.
Best receiver on my board is not McMillan. It's actually Luther Burden. Is that who you said? Is that who you suggested? Because I actually like that suggestion, William. I'm not sure if the Panthers are bold enough to do it, but I love that suggestion.
Yes, sir. That's definitely my suggestion.
Okay, so we got one vote for Burden. We got one vote for Pierce, I think, from Joey, and one vote for Mikael Williams. I have Burden ahead of Williams on my board, but I'm not sure the Panthers are bold enough to go that route, but they do need a receiver. So after careful deliberation, the Panthers are going to get Luther Burden. If I have to break the tie, I'm going to go for Burden at 8. And yeah, that's first shock value pick in this top 10. We have a shock value pick here. And then number 9, the Saints. They need a receiver as well. We could give them Ashton Genty, but they have Alvin Kamara. They just paid him. So the Saints are going to get McMillan here. And the Bears are going to get Genty at 10. And that's going to be the top 10. So everybody in the top 9, in my top 9, is off the board. Mikael Williams is there at 11. Who do the 49ers have next to Bosa? Because I'm tempted to go Mikael Williams here just based on value alone. But I want to see what they did in free agency. I want to quickly double check, take a closer look at what they did in free agency. Okay, they kept Yetter Gross-Matos and Drake Jackson. They let Leonard Floyd walk, but they kept Drake Jackson, and Yetter Gross-Matos is starting next to Bosa, according to our lads. I am not allowing that. So I'm sorry, William, but that is not. I am not allowing Yetter Gross-Matos to start next to Bosa. That is just. That's how you. Because Bosa's just going to be getting double teamed, triple teamed on every play like Myles Garrett last year. If that's the 49ers plan. I'm going to go Mikael Williams, Georgia edge rushers, number 1 on my board. He's 10th on my board, best player left on my board. I'm going to go Mikael Williams. I think Pierce is more of a 34 outside linebacker. Who do you like here? I mean, 49ers are your team. I should let you make the pick here. I mean, or should let you make a case for who's available at 11. Banks is still there. Membau's a right tackle. I'm not high on Membau, but there are people that think he could be Trent Williams. Walter Cherepinski thinks Membau could be Trent Williams, the next Trent Williams. I mean, that might be one of the worst hot takes I've read for the draft cycle. I've read some bad hot takes for the draft. That one might take the cake, even though Walter is great at what he does. But I just completely disagree with that Armand Membau, Trent Williams comparison. I can understand the thought process when you look at the athletic traits in the 40 time and the wingspan and the arm length. I can understand the thought process, but I just don't agree with that take at all.
Yeah. Well, the 49ers with what happened in the Super Bowl, I've said it before, I'll say it again. They need a defensive tackle badly, but I mean, is there really one to take here?
It's a deep defensive tackle draft, and you can get a defensive tackle in round 2. That's the problem.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. As for Kyle Shanahan, I mean, I'm not quite sure who fits exactly what he's after. But 11 is kind of high, and this is actually going to sound kind of a little bit crazy, but I would take Colson Loveland here.
It's interesting. My number 2 player is Emeka Egbuka. I do have Tyler Warren at 18 on my board. I have Colson Loveland at 28, but I do think Loveland's ceiling is higher than I think Warren's got the best floor, but I think Warren's going to end up being a high-end starter who maxes out after his rookie year. Whereas I think Loveland, even though he's a little bit rawer than Warren, not raw in the sense that he can't play. I think both guys are day one starters. I've got an 82 for floor grade on Warren out of 99, but I have a ceiling grade of 88 for Warren. I think he's one of those players who reaches his ceiling after a year or two and then maxes out. And with Loveland, he might take 2 or 3 years to reach his ceiling, but he's got the ceiling of a Pro Bowl tight end. And that's why you could argue he should be tight end 1 over Warren, even with Warren winning the Mackey. So
Tyler Warren got a lot of play this year for, who he was. But his football IQ is way there. He can play. I mean, he just knows so much about it. But I've, fully evaluated, Colson Loveland, and I love the kid. He can block, he can catch. He's got crisp, clean movements. Some of these tight ends are kind of wobbly a little bit, things like that. Colson Loveland doesn't move like that. I mean, he is just an absolute beast, and, true wide tight ends are hard to find, especially ones, that can start day one. It's one of the toughest positions to learn. They have to do everything that a wide receiver does and everything that a left tackle does. And, they get half the pay. But
I think Egbuka's ceiling is slightly higher than Loveland's. I think his floor is higher than both tight ends. The problem with Egbuka here is the Niners drafted a receiver last year, and they've still got Ayuk. They've still got Ricky Pearsall, who's probably going to be the number 2 now. You could go Egbuka here. I just don't think that's the player John Lynch is going to take at the end of the day. Egbuka would be a good selection here. I just don't think that's the guy Lynch is going to pick.
And, the one guy that's already off the board is Luther Burden. I can see him coming into this offense and doing really well, and, being replacement. I see Ricky Pearsall as he can probably play number 2, but I see him as a slot wide receiver.
The next player on my board behind Williams and Egbuka is Xavier Watts. He could be a replacement for Hufanga, but you have Malika. You have the Wake Forest safety you drafted, and you got the Jair Brown, and you got Malik Mustafa. If you're confident in those 2 safeties, you don't have to take a safety this early.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
But I
do think
talked
Watts
about
is
Xavier
an upgrade
Watts.
over Mustafa. I like Jair Brown. I wasn't as high in Mustafa, but Mustafa did better than I expected as a rookie. I'm not going to say he did well or give him the benefit of the doubt like Joey would sometimes, but he did better than I expected him to. I'll give him that.
I would not be mad at them picking Xavier Watts. We talked about Xavier Watts on Under the Bleachers. And I mean, he's a great player. And just that would be, maybe that's what the Niners need. I mean, they've got a whole lot of offense.
Because there are 3 players I'm pounding the table for here at 11. Number 10 on my board is Mikael Williams. 11 is Egbuka. and 12 is Watts. And it feels like Watts is the only one of those three we can come to an agreement on. I have Pierce at 13 on my board now. I had him. I know Joey has him a little bit, maybe around the same range. Pierce would be the fourth guy I'm looking at, but it seems like as far as the Niners, the only player we can agree on of those 3-4 guys is Watts. So we'll go with Watts at 11.
Yeah. Sounds good to me, man.
All right. Or 12, actually. Or no, 11.
That's 11, yeah.
11, yeah. I'm just... All right, Cowboys, they get Mikael Williams. I'm basically, they lost DeMarcus Lawrence, the Seahawks. They don't have an edge rusher next to Micah Parsons, and Micah Parsons wants 50. He wants more money than Garrett. He wants $50 million a year over 4 years. So Myles Garrett's the highest paid defensive player. I think he's making $40.5 million over 3 years. Micah Parsons, I hear, he wants $50 million a year. And as much as I like Micah Parsons, I'm just, if you get a chance to draft either Pierce or Mikael Williams on a rookie deal, you have to pull the trigger and use that as leverage to try to drive down Micah Parsons' value, because he deserves $50 million, but if you're Jerry Jones, you do not want to pay him $50 million after paying Lamb and Dak $60 million a year.
Yeah, Micah Parsons. That's just way too much, man.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Jones, these three guys, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons, they all deserve the money they're getting, but these guys are giving Jerry Jones tariffs that are worse than the tariffs that we're seeing in politics. And I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to open that can of worms in this podcast. But yeah, that's what I would compare paying all three of those guys to. Your Jerry Jones tariffs.
I saw that jab.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. You are absolutely correct. I'm going to go Mikael Williams here at 12. Dolphins at 13. This is a tougher team to pick for. Egbuka's the top player on my board, but the Dolphins have Hill and Waddle. They're not drafting a receiver. And they're getting Bradley Chubb back from a ACL injury. He's going to be healthy, fully cleared from his injury that caused him to miss most of 2024. You're going to have Jalen Phillips back at edge rusher, and Chop Robinson goes from being a regular starter as a rookie to a situational edge, gets a little bit more time to develop. I mean, you could draft another edge rusher here. Pierce is a great fit for Miami, but do you have a buyout plan? The Dolphins, they have Patrick Paul at left tackle. He took the left tackle job from Teron Armstead, and Austin Jackson's your right tackle, and I don't see a right tackle worth picking at 14. Walter Nolan is 15 on my board. He would be an upgrade at nose tackle, but the Dolphins are huge on character. I don't see them picking Walter Nolan. I think Walter Nolan would be an excellent fit for Miami, but I also get the feeling that Chris Grier, the Dolphins GM, is too chicken shit to gamble on Walter Nolan after he flaked on the combine drills. I just get that vibe that he's too chicken shit to pick him. I hope I'm wrong, but nah, I'm a Patriots fan, so I'm going to trust my gut on this one. But if Grier wants to call me out on my bluff and draft Nolan, he's more than welcome to. But Tyler Booker, Dolphins lost their right guard, Robert Hunt, to free agency, and their left guard's gone too. I think Tyler Booker's a great fit for the Dolphins. There's no character concerns with him. Very safe pick. Tyler Booker, I really can't make an argument against Tyler Booker to Miami. Can you? Can either of you make an argument to why I shouldn't give the Dolphins Tyler Booker?
I can't.
I have Kelvin Banks higher on my board than Booker. Booker's a better fit for Miami. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, McDaniels is going to try to do something genius, and we're going to find out exactly what that is.
So Tyler Booker to Miami at 15 or 13, actually, and the Colts at 14. They are big on character and potential and relative athletic scores. But yes, football character is a big thing for the Colts. They're not going to take Pierce, even though they should. Kelvin Banks, that does feel like a pick they would make, because you have both tackles coming up in contract years, both Braden Smith and Bernard Raymond. Raymond enters the final year of his rookie deal. Braden Smith also enters the final year of his deal at tackle. You can develop Kelvin Banks for a year if you don't want to start him right away. And Matt Goncalves, who came in for Braden Smith as the backup right tackle, he can remain the backup right tackle, but Banks and Raymond compete for the left tackle job. And if Banks wins that job, you can trade Raymond for something before his rookie deal is up, or you can keep him as a backup and give Kelvin Banks some insurance in that competition as he eases into that left tackle role. But I do think Kelvin Banks is the best fit for the Colts here. I'm going to mock Banks here. I know I've got a Colts friend. She loves Kelvin Banks, so I'm going to mock Kelvin Banks to the Colts, even though this is going to piss off Hunter Haas, who is a huge Colts fan who thinks Kelvin Banks is going to kick inside to guard. Sorry, Hunter. Can't argue with my...
Yeah, and they got to protect their young quarterback, man.
They got to protect
whatever that happens.
Richardson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Warren's still on the board. Warren would have been a great fit for the Colts too, but Banks is atop of my... Banks is the number one tackle on my board. I could have gone with Egbuka. Egbuka was the number one player on my board. The Colts are stacked at receiver. They've got Adonai Mitchell. They brought back the receiver Ashton Dutton from week 1, who got the touchdown. They've got Pierce on a rookie deal. They've got Josh Downs on a rookie deal. They got Adonai Mitchell on a rookie deal. The Colts just have too many weapons. They're not taking Egbuka at 14. They're just not. And they paid Michael Pittman. Now, the Falcons, on the other hand, they do need another weapon next to Drake London and Darnell Mooney. I think Egbuka is a perfect spot for Atlanta. They could go Matthew Golden here too, but I've got Egbuka at 11 on my board, so Egbuka to the Falcons it is. They also need an edge rusher, but I have Egbuka ahead of Pierce on my board. Cardinals, they did get Josh Sweat in free agency, but now they're going to go best player available, and they're going to get James Pierce to pair with Josh Sweat. That's a lethal 1-2 punch at edge rusher, and that is going to cause a lot of problems because a lot of the good veterans that you have are going to be backups in depth roles to Pierce and Sweat now, and that's going to make this defense even harder to game plan against. So Pierce ends up on the Cardinals at 16. I know you really like that pick, Joey, and with what the Cardinals are building with their coaching staff under Jonathan Gannon and their offensive coordinator, who used to be the Browns QB coach, they're building a really good foundation. Bengals, I'm going to give the Bengals Walter Nolan. Walter Nolan's the best player on my board, and I don't think the Bengals care about any of the character concerns he may have. They could get an edge rusher, but I'm not as high on some of these edge rushers, and I have a lot of confidence in Myles Murphy. They could get an edge rusher. I'll acknowledge that, but I also feel like they need a defensive tackle, and Walter Nolan's the top guy on my board. Seahawks at 18. That's just tough. Best player on my board at this point is Jahdae Barron. Do the Seahawks need Barron, though? The Seahawks need Jahdae Barron out of Texas. CJ Cuevas, Niners fan, our group mock, loves Jahdae Barron. The fact that I'm entertaining mocking the Seahawks probably pisses him off to a degree. But you're looking at the Seahawks secondary, they have Josh Jobe, undrafted corner, as their number one corner. They have Rick Woolen as their boundary and Devin Witherspoon as their nickel. I think Woolen and Witherspoon need to be on the outside, but yeah, they need an upgrade at that number 3 corner spot. You have Dobe, you have Prickett, and you have Demarion Williams. I think you move Witherspoon to the number 1 corner role and you plug Barron in the nickel. So yeah, Barron is the best player on my board. I'm I have Barron at 17 and Tyler Warren at 18. So, yeah, I'm going to stick to the best player on my board strategy, and Jahdae Barron's a Seahawk.
As far as I'm concerned, the Seahawks can drop right out of the first round and, go somewhere. And,
yeah, the Buccaneers at 9.
There's some creative words for
the best player on the board is Tyler Warren, but I don't think the Buccaneers have 3 tight ends on their depth chart. And they've got Drew on rookie deals, Payne Durham, they've got Keith, and they've got another guy on a rookie deal. Cade Otton, that's the other guy, the starting tight end. So, yeah, as much as I like the idea
pretty good one
of
too.
Baker, Tyler Warren, but in the theory, you can let those tight ends on rookie deals walk if you do draft Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about Tyler Warren? The next player on my board, Matthew Golden. He's not a fit for Tampa. They brought back Godwin, and they still have Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan on rookie deals. Tate Ratledge is a right guard, but they've got Cody Mock on a rookie deal. Ratledge doesn't have experience at left guard. Deion Walker and Kenneth Grant, both good nose tackles. Derek Harmon too, but the problem is they've got Vita V at nose tackle. They're not drafting another nose tackle. Next best player on my board is Nick Eamon-Warry, strong safety. He would actually complement Antoine Winfield really well. So, any objections to Eamon-Warry to Tampa? I know that's going to piss some Bucs fans off, but I don't think there's an edge rusher worth taking here. I really like the idea of Eamon-Warry, and I haven't heard from you.
I think it makes sense.
Eamon-Warry and Winfield to the Bucs safety tandem. How do you feel about that? I know it's an unconventional pick.
I actually really like it. I was actually just looking up Tyler Warren because Tyler Warren I think is a great fit as well. The only way the Bucs screw this up is that they try. They're going to have a great kick sitting in the lap.
I mean, Otton, Durham, Keith, and Culp are all on rookie deals, but I think you could also make the argument that Tyler Warren's an upgrade over all of those guys, with Otton being the only guy who has more upside than him. But I would also argue Warren's floor right now is better than Otton's floor, even though Otton's been very reliable. Well, Winfield's listed at strong safety, and Christian Isian's listed at free safety. And if Winfield was listed at free safety, I would go with Eamon-Warry here. But I'm going to go with Tyler Warren. Shock value pick. I'm going to go with Tyler Warren to Tampa. This is going to be...
Man, that's who the Broncos needed.
But to make things up to Williams, since the Bucs just screwed him out of Tyler Warren, his Broncos get Colson Loveland with the very next pick. Are you happy?
That's a great pick. Bo Nix needs a tight end. Denver hasn't had one in a minute.
So Colson Loveland, and the Chargers get
Colson Loveland makes 100% sense right there, man.
All right, so looking at my big board here, who is available for the Steelers at? I think the best player on my board might be Matthew Golden.
Hey,
double check.
Jackson Dart.
Nope, it is Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden is the best player on my board, but I thought the Steelers added another receiver in free agency. I want to double check that before I lock Matthew Golden into Pittsburgh. They added, nope, they didn't. They've got DK Metcalf and Pickens as their outside. Calvin Austin's their slot. They've got Scotty Miller from Atlanta, Groban Wilson, and Ben Skowronek, and that's it. They don't have another receiver. So Matthew Golden's going to be Pittsburgh's slot receiver next to Pickens and Metcalf, and he can be the number two receiver next year when – well, actually, he can be the number one if both Metcalf and Pickens leave. So Matthew Golden makes a lot of sense here for Pittsburgh.
I agree.
Yep. And the Chargers, gonna go with a surprise pick here for the Chargers. I know a lot of people are thinking Harbaugh's gonna get a Michigan man and Kenneth Grant. Nope. The best player on my board, the best two players on my board are Tate Ratledge, the Georgia right guard, and Deion Walker, the Kentucky nose tackle. And you know what? The Chargers, they have right now their starting right guard is the guy their former right tackle Trey Pipkins III. We're replacing Trey Pipkins because he sucks. And ironically enough, best player on the board is a lineman. So Tate Ratledge comes off the board at 21. And Harbaugh saw Ratledge as a freshman against Michigan in the game where Georgia blew out Michigan. So Tate Ratledge, the Chargers, and that's a surprise pick. Very sneaky surprise pick, too.
Oh man, so many teams, everybody and their uncle has the Chargers, taking a tight end or taking like Colson Loveland,
or taking Kenneth Grant out of Michigan at nose
yeah,
tackle.
yeah.
But I think
I
there's
just
better
don't
nose
see either
tackles
one,
on the
man.
board. I've got Deion Walker at 21 on my board, but I've got Tate Ratledge at 20. And Ratledge held his own against Walker before leaving that game with an injury early in the season. So I've got Ratledge to the Chargers. Surprise pick.
Don't discount Harbaugh pick receiver. Everything to do, but it's not what they do.
But there's no first-round receivers on the board thanks to Golden going to the Steelers. So the best player on my board is Trey Harris. I had a first-round grade on Restrepo, but he ran a 4.63 at his pro day, and then we found out it was a 4.84. So he might be moving way, way down now. He's not going in day one now.
Yeah,
going in day two, but that pro day really
about a
hamstring
or a hamstrung, should I say?
That pro day really screwed up his stock. So
he probably just shouldn't have run a 40.
Ends up on the Chargers. No tight ends or receivers with a first round grade. Chargers go offensive line.
Yeah.
Packers.
That makes sense.
Best player on my board for the Packers is Deion Walker, the Kentucky defensive tackle. I'm not sure they would pick him here, but I'm not sure who else to pick. Other option is Josh Connerly or Malachi Starks. And, the Packers, they already have Rasheed Walker on the end of his rookie deal. Unless they want to get Connerly and reload at left tackle and let Walker walk after next season, they might extend Walker too. We don't know. So, I could see them replacing Walker, but I could also see them extending him on a team-friendly deal. That's the tricky thing with the Packers. They do have Kenny Clark extended, but Devontae White hasn't made the progress people liked. TJ Sanders actually ended up taking a starting job from Devontae Wyatt last year, but he left the Packers and signed with the Bengals. But I view him as a stopgap for the Bengals rather than a long-term starter. So, which is why I mocked a defensive tackle, the Bengals at 18, Walter Nolan. So, yeah, I guess we're going Deion Walker out of Kentucky to the Packers. It doesn't feel like, I feel like if the Packers were given the choice between Walker, Kenneth Grant, and Derek Harmon, they would go with Grant or Harmon just based on scheme fit and attitude. I don't think they would pick Walker personally, but he's the best player on my board. And, when it comes to mocks, I go with the best player on my board. That's just who I am by nature, even if I'm wrong.
That is the way to go, man.
I got Grant at 22 on my board and Harmon at 23. The problem is I have Deion Walker at 21. But there's questions about Walker's pad level. So,
that's a good problem to have.
So that's why I went with Walker to the Packers. So it's very close. It's like, and the Vikings, they need a nose tackle. They lost Tonga, so they're going to get Kenneth Grant. So JJ McCarthy and Kenneth Grant are going to reunite with the Vikings. And no, Minnesota, you're not getting Connor Stallions. You're not getting Connor Stallions no matter how much you want him to be part of the JJ McCarthy Kenneth Grant reunion. It's not happening in this mock draft. The Texans are in an interesting spot. Derek Harmon is the best player on my board. Texans replaced Tunsil with Cam Robinson on a 1-year deal. We could give the Texans Connerly here. He's 26th on my board, but I also want to look at the defensive tackles, see if there's a player who is better than Derek Harmon for the Texans here. Texans, they have Cam Robinson on a 1-year deal, and they still have Sheldon Rankins and Tim Settle. Their backup to Sheldon Rankins is Mario Edwards Jr., but they do not have any depth behind Tim Settle if injuries occur. Right now, Kurt Hinish, an undrafted free agent, is the backup defensive tackle to Tim Settle, and the third stringer is former Brown Tommy Togiai. So Togiai went from being a backup on the Texans to being demoted to third string. Okay. Togiai is going to have a big mini camp with the Texans to save his roster spot. He's actually going to have to take the initiative to go to Texans mini camp with the rookies, show the initiative to work out early if he wants to save his roster spot. Because if he doesn't show that fire, he might be a preseason candidate to get cut by Houston. And if they draft a defensive tackle, Togiai and the undrafted guy are both certainties to get cut. And you have depth. So I'm going to go Derek Harmon for the Texans, even though you could make an argument for Connerly or Membao here.
With Togiai, you was a guy that was supposed to be a good run stuff on. Not much else. That great nose tackle could run stuff on. But after the Browns, I'm about to use nothing.
Yeah, the Texans signed him last year as a backup for depth, like a number 3, number 4 defensive tackle for depth, but that's really all he was. He was an insurance defensive tackle, an insurance body. That's really all he was, and now he's on the brink of losing that number 4 defensive tackle job. So, yeah, and I think he's a 2021 third-round pick, so he's lost 2 defensive tackle, 2 rosters. We're talking about a guy who might be might be getting cut from 2 different teams in 5 years. So Derek Harmon, if you draft Harmon, Togiai is guaranteed to get cut. And if you get a tackle, you probably get Connerly, but I'm going to go Harmon to the Texans. I think Harmon's I'm a big proponent and best player on the board in round 1, especially if there's a position. And I like Tim Settle as a stopgap, but I don't view him as a long-term starter. I like Sheldon Rankins as a short-term starter, but he had a lot of penalties and missed time with injuries. So that would be my argument against him. We got 6 more picks here. The Rams are on the clock. Jake Ellenbogen's team is up. Best player on my board is Nick Eamon-Wari. He's a strong safety. What do the Rams have at strong safety? They brought back Alaric Jackson at left tackle, so that pretty much eliminates Connerly. What do the Rams have at strong safety? They have Cameron Curl, who actually did have a good year last year after getting cut by the Commanders. And Cameron Kitchens came in as a rookie and took the free safety job. So safety's not really a need for the Rams. Number 2 player on my board, Shamar Stewart, but I think he's more of a 43. Malachi Starks is also a great fit for the Rams, but the problem is they've got a good free safety in Kitchens on a rookie deal. I do think Starks is better than Kitchens. Steve Avila is the left guard. They're not going to draft Clay Webb. Scorton, Donovan Jackson. They gave Alaric Jackson a 3-year extension. This is tough because there's a lot of good players left, but none of them really fit that major need for the Rams. They did draft they did sign Adams to a multi-year deal, and they gave Tutu a 1-year extension. So if there's not a receiver with a unanimous first-round grade, they don't have to draft one. Right now, let me look at the Rams. Rob Havenstein's the right guard, right tackle. So I'm going to go with the defensive tackle. I'm going to go with the safety from South Carolina, Eamon-Wari here. He could start him out as a backup to Cameron Curl. He'll be a starter by the end of the year. Tough call. Not really a huge need for the Rams, but I really can't identify any other positions the Rams would target at this point in the draft.
Yeah, the Rams have a good team, and they're not exactly used to having first round picks, or at least in the past few years. But this is a tough spot. I
The
do like
Ravens
what you
are on the
said.
clock. They extended Ronnie Stanley. Gives I don't know if Eyes is a 34 defensive end next to Matt Buike with Brent Urban gone, or if he plays edge rusher. But I think Shamar Stewart makes a lot of sense for the Ravens here with Ronnie Stanley getting a 3-year extension. I could mock Connerly here, but I don't think the Ravens are taking a left tackle after giving Stanley a 3-year extension. I think Shamar Stewart at edge rusher makes a lot of sense for the Ravens now.
That's a Ravens type pick for sure.
Let's be honest. Right now, the Ravens are in a place where they want to win now. Okay? Is Ronnie Stanley past his prime? Yes. Is Ronnie Stanley the best option to win now? So it's like the Ravens are trying to win. They are trying to dethrone the Chiefs. They're trying to get past the Bills. Option is to keep Ronnie Stanley, that offensive line that knows each other so well, right where they are. And if you have to fill in the gap with the draft, do it. But you keep Lamar Jackson at his best, no matter the cost. And that's where the Ravens are. We can talk about the Browns, the Steelers, and the Bengals all we want, but the Ravens are the team that are looking to punch through right now, and they are not making any moves to get us in any veterans.
This is a tough spot for the Lions because I really don't feel like they have a major need. I mean, right now, I'll go through a list of players that are in my top 32. Number one player in my top 32 still on the board is Josh Connerly. Not an immediate need, but next year you're going to be paying Taylor Decker, Ronnie Stanley, and Frank Ragnow monster contracts. If you want to get out of Decker's contract, the earliest you can get out of that is 2026. And if you think Connerly can play left tackle down the road, it's a player you can roll the dice on here. But I don't think it's the best fit for the Lions necessarily if you're trying to win now. Next on my board is Malachi Starks. I do love Malachi Starks here, but right now the Lions, they have Brian Branch at strong safety for 2 more years and Kirby Joseph at free safety. I've got a feeling Kirby Joseph's going to get extended, but if you're trying to pay Aiden Hutchinson, you don't think you have the cap space to draft, keep Kirby Joseph and Aiden, you can let Kirby walk and draft Starks here and just develop him and reload. That is an option. It's not a great option, but that is an option.
I love this. Starks is one of my top 12 players in this draft. I love this pick. I absolutely love it. Great job.
The other options could go Clay Webb, but you have Glasnow back at left guard, and Christian Mahogany did well for a 6th round rookie at right guard. So guard isn't really a need for the Lions anymore. Nick Scorton, you could bring him in. You did bring back Davenport on a team friendly deal. Pascal's back on the final year of his rookie deal, but you cut Zadarius Smith. You cut Zadarius Smith. So, and Donovan Jackson's another guard option, but I'm looking at the Lions. As much as I want to give them a tackle, they've got Taylor Decker. I think the best logical options are either Starks or Scorton. But they're in a great spot where whoever they draft, they can ease in, whether it's a tackle, if they want to cut Decker when his contract gets out of hand, if they want to cut Decker, or if they want to let Connerly walk. They're in a great spot. Regardless of what rookie they draft, they can ease them in. I mean, that's the thing, Joey. That's really the main thing I'm looking at. But just as far as fits go, I would argue
Well, let's be honest about the Zadarius Smith thing. The Browns are supposed to let their young guys get the chance. And the Lions needed a stopgap. So it's not like the Lions need somebody when they're healthy.
Yeah, and they like Aiden Hutchinson and Davenport better than Smith when both are healthy. That's the thing. That's fine. They feel that way. And Pascal is a situational edge on a rookie deal. I think it Starks or Scorton here. As much as I want to give the Lions a tackle, I don't think they're gonna. As long as Decker's in the roster, I don't think they're gonna go.
They do not need a defensive end unless there are injuries.
And right now, Brian Branch is your strong safety. Kirby Joseph is your free safety. But you're not just gonna have to pay Aiden Hutchinson. You're gonna have to pay other guys from the 22 draft next year. Whether it's Pascal. Yes, and Kirby Joseph's a great free safety when he's healthy. Brian Branch is a good strong safety, and Branch will remain the strong safety. You have no depth behind Joseph and Branch if injuries occur. Lauren Strickland undrafted, Maurice Norris undrafted are the backups if anything were to happen to Branch or Joseph. That is extremely problematic to the point where only a fool would ignore that. So after looking at the backups in the Lions depth chart, I'm going with Starks and taking Joey's advice here because I think that is the obvious decision here because even if you can bring Joseph back, in that scenario, Branch should be the guy out. But you're going to have a lot of contracts to negotiate with the 23 draft too. Sam Laporta, Gibbs, Montgomery will probably be a buyout when that time arrives. You're going to have to bring back Jack Campbell, Arnold, fifth-year tender. Just a lot of deals. So I could see the Lions letting Kirby Joseph walk just because of all that's on the table. And getting Starks and reloading is a good way to go about that. The Commanders got Laramie Tunsil, so they're not taking a left tackle. Best player on my board is Connerly, but he's not going to come off the board here. What do the Commanders have at guard? I just want to double check because Clay Webb is the best player on my board. But
they've got Cosme and
Nick Scorton's more of a fit. I think Scorton's a better fit. They have Nick Allegretti, the Chiefs left guard, back at left guard, and they've got Nate Herbig, the Steelers backup guard, as their backup left guard. I don't think they're going to draft a guard early. They've got Dorrance Armstrong at left end and Clellan Farrell back at right end. Dietrich Wise and Jacob Martin are the backup defensive ends. Honestly, this does feel like a best player on the board situation. They have Brandon Coleman listed as a backup, but Coleman might end up moving. They gave Cosme a big extension. This is tough.
I'm with Chris on this one. Because I think they get a couple big young ones. So whether they want an upgrade is.
I do think Clay Webb and Donovan Jackson, who are both in my top 32 in the new big board I made a week ago, I do think those two are both upgrades over Allegretti. The question is, do the Commanders want to pull the trigger on that? Or do they want to get a defensive end like Nick Scorton for Dan Quinn's defense?
Or what if they draft a running back like Amara Hampton?
Because Commanders are looking to destroy the Cowboys, destroy anybody that gets in their way, and win this division. And you're not going to do that unless you get the best player available on the board. I don't care if it's a guard. I don't care what it is. The Commanders are ready. They got a quarterback, and this is what we were talking about with number 1, 2, and 3. And this is what I say. If you don't got the quarterback, you don't got the offense. Last year, they got Jaden Daniels. They got the quarterback, and you saw what happened. Okay? So now they can go in and rock that house with everything else that's going on, and they can hit that. So don't.
Unfortunately, I cannot mock Clay Webb, my number one guard to the Commanders. So the Commanders are not getting a guard. I'm because the board decided to be a jerk to because the NFL Draft Buzz board decided to be a jerk and not let me mock Clay Webb. Commanders will not get Clay Webb. I'm not going to give him Donovan Jackson either. I'm going to give him Nick Scorton at edge rusher.
I'd love to see him draft Amarion Hampton. You know,
I think Scorton is a long-term upgrade over both Dorrance Armstrong and Clellan Ferrell, who are both familiar with Dan Quinn's defense, but also stopgaps.
I agree with you, but why would the website not let
Our Lads only lets you draft players, like, for offensive tackle, they have Clay Webb at 130. So if it's the first, they have Clay, they might have Clay Webb. No, they have Clay Webb at like 180, I guess. Because they have Clay, they have Jonah Monheim at 172, and you can't pick a player below 172 this early in the draft. That's how NFL Draft Buzz operates. It's not me, it's the site, Joey. This is why you requested the NFL mock draft database simulator. I didn't think Clay Webb was that low on the board, in my defense. I thought he was higher on the board. So I can't pick Clay Webb, even though he's my top guard. So, all right, that's fine. The Bills are up.
Clay Webb is the guy we're all high on. So it's like, for him to be ineligible, that's...
Yeah, they have him below 173. I know he was at 130 on Draft Buzz heading in the Combine, but I didn't think they moved him down that far past 170. I think that's a little egregious. I don't agree with that. I think that I'm not saying he's a surefire first rounder, but I think that decision by Draft Buzz is a little bit egregious. That's all.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we more agree as well.
All right, so who's at 30 for the Bills? Bills are up at 30. They do need a guard. I think left guard David Edwards is gone, and if he is, we're just gonna have to give the Bills Donovan Jackson, even if we think Clay Webb is better, because the simulator. No, David Edwards is back with the Bills. Okay, so the Bills.
How do you say maybe? You know, most of the pressure against Allen was coming up the middle. Why do you say maybe need a guard? It's like they need at least somebody.
They got Cyrus Torrance at right guard. They moved Connor McGovern, their left guard, to center last year, and David Edwards was started at left guard, and he got re-signed in a one-year deal. So David Edwards, that's why the Bills don't have to draft offensive linemen.
Well, McGovern was a very good right guard.
Left guard. He was a left guard, but
Left guard, sorry. But he was a very good left guard,
but they moved him to center. He was such a good communicator. They said, we want you to transition inside to center with Mitch Morse gone. And he made the transition work, but, you know, not necessarily the move I would have made, the first move I would have made.
It's because that explains why I'm going through some plays in my head that I watched during the year. And that explains why there's so much pressure up the middle off that left side, because you took a very good left guard and a very good right guard and a decent center and replaced them by shuffling things around, by putting the very good left guard in the center, making him an excellent center, that you replace him with a decent guard. And Josh Allen's entire strength of this game, that interior 1-2-3, either holding up the interior pass rush or clearing out lanes for him to run. Because he can hit, because he can get out of exterior pass rush, unlike anybody in the game today. that interior pass rush is what hurts him. That's what hurt him this year. He should have been hands down MVP. Nobody is saying otherwise. Well, I think he won MVP, but there was some argument. There should have been no argument. But that interior pass rush hurt. That interior pass rush hurt. He should have thrown for 5,500 yards this year. That left guard position, when that faltered,
Well, I'm tempted to give the Bills a left tackle because here's why. Deion Dawkins, he began his college career as a guard. You could move him to guard, but his contract, you can buy him out. I don't think that buying him out is a good idea. But at the same token, his contract is very flexible to where there is very little. You could save $8.8 million if you buy him out in 2026, and you can save $15 million if you buy him out in 2027. 31. Deion Dawkins is 31, Joey. But you could save $15 million if you cut him. That's why I'm thinking maybe we give the Bills a left tackle, but he starts out as a backup to Dawkins, and we develop him for a few years. And then when Dawkins is 33, we buy him out and put the rookie in on a team-friendly rookie contract. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And I know it sounds kind of stupid, but Dawkins is getting up there in age. I think he's got one or two good years left, but after Super Bowl 61, I think he's going to start declining. And so I'm going to go Josh Connerly. Josh Connerly, the Oregon left tackle, because if the Bills do not draft Josh Connerly, the Chiefs get him. And I You could start Connerly out as a left guard and then move him over to tackle when Dawkins is 33. That's the other thing. I think Connerly's more of a true left tackle than a guard. I do.
You have to be careful with that because that was the plan when the Browns drafted Lobatonio to replace Bill Thomas when he retired. Lobatonio was so good at that position, they couldn't replace him at that position.
Well, Batonio was always a guard. Looking at his college tape, he was always a guard.
Not tackle, though, at college. So it's like, if you put him at guard, it could be like the Batonio position. It's like, yeah, he was a left tackle, but he was always considered a guard. Well, guess what? He may be a guard for the next 15 years. He may be the best guard in the league. And then your entire thought process of having him replace the veteran is going to blow up in your face. So,
well, I think he's a tackle. Connerly played left tackle his entire college career. I think he's a left tackle. I don't think he's a guard. I think he's a left tackle. So
I think he's more of a guard. So it's like it's an either or, but you're either going to have, by your or my standard, you're either going to have one of the best guards in the league in 3 years, or you're going to have one of the best offensive tackles in the league in 5 years. So what are you looking, it's like, do you want to take...
I'm drafting him as a tackle because I think you could draft him as a plug-and-play guard, but I view him as more of a left tackle. I don't view him as a guard. It's a great pick either way. He's the best player on my board. So... And if you don't draft him, the Chiefs are going to draft him to be their left tackle. But because because the Bills drafted Connerly to be their left tackle, the Chiefs get Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. Josh Simmons out of Ohio State is a Chief.
That is a discussion because Simmons, by some people's standards, if he would have gotten injured, would have been a top 15. By other people's standards, would have been a second round pick.
I had him at 34 in my big board, but when Restrepo ran a 4.64, found out 4.8, 4.40, we moved him and Quincy Riley down to day 2. And the top 2 guys in the second round of my board were Donovan Jackson at 33 and Josh Simmons at 34. So those 2 propelled into my top 32. Yeah.
Donovan Jackson took over from
Yes.
him. So that it makes it so much more interesting, doesn't it?
Agreed.
You know, I love the thought process because I love Simmons. I love his athleticism. What his athleticism was before the injury. I love his thought process. I love things about him, and I think he's a first-round pick. At the same time, he got injured, and we don't know for sure because he wasn't able to shine in the biggest moments when other players in his position did.
That's why I have Jackson ahead of him on my board. I have Jackson at 31, and I have Josh Simmons at 32 on my board.
Still, two guys very good at what they do, and it is a very interesting decision. We could talk about those two guys for a half hour.
We could.
Just walking in there. And it's a great discussion based on those two guys and their draft position.
Yeah, I mean, Clay Webb, Donovan Jackson, both are left guards for me at the next level. The Eagles have stability there, so I'm not giving the Eagles one of those two. Trey Harris is the next best player on my board. He would be nothing but a slot receiver in Philly. And they've got Dotson, plus they've got some guys from last year's draft in a rookie deal. Izaraku, edge rusher out of Boston College. He's 34 on my big board, but I think he's an ideal fit for a 34 defense like the one the Eagles run. So I guess we'll go with Izaraku at 32. I really don't know what else we could do here. We could push up a running back for depth, but we could give the Eagles a 34 left end to replace Milton Williams. A guy like Tyleek Williams might be a good fit here, but I think Izaraku makes a lot of sense. The Eagles, they did lose Josh Sweat. They still have Bryce Huff, but Huff was a backup last year. It's Nolan Smith and Sweat were the main starters. Huff got demoted to backup edge rusher when many thought he would start. He'll end up losing out to Nolan Smith. So I'm thinking we're going to go with Donovan Izaraku, and he's going to be the Mike Green fell to 32, as did Jalen Walker. Howie Roseman might draft one of those two in this scenario just to piss off the rest of the NFL, but I like Izaraku more. So Izaraku is going to be my pick for the Eagles, and that's going to be the draft for the first round. I'm not going to go into round 2. I'm not going to go in depth with the big board. We will have more draft discussions in April, guys. Believe me. William,
Yes,
Joey,
sir.
and I, we're going to have more draft discussions. The group mock, 7-round group mock starts Monday. A lot of exciting stuff going on in April. OHL drafts 13 days from today for the Ontario Hockey League. William and I discussed that at the beginning. And Cameron Warren, OHL Cup MVP, goal and assist. And a lot of OHL Cup MVPs like Stamkos and McDavid went number 1 in the OHL draft. Michael Misa, Shane Wright. Could talk about the history on and on, but yeah, that's the second Friday in April. The WNBA draft is 3 days later on the second Monday in April, and then because April 7th is the first Monday in April, and then the NFL draft is 9 days after the WNBA draft. So, and I talked about the CHL playoffs briefly before William arrived, but OHL doesn't seem very exciting. I mean, the Erie Otters embarrassed Saginaw without Matthew Schaefer. They took a 7-0 lead on Saginaw. And Saginaw's better than that. That is embarrassing. You have Misa, who's a former number 1 pick, and you also have Zane Pareka, a defenseman who got 100 points and was the catalyst of your Memorial Cup winning team. You were the best Canadian hockey team out of the Western Hockey League, the Ontario Hockey League, and the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Defending champions. And you allow Erie Otters, without Matthew Schaefer, their best player, to score 7 in a row on you. If Joey was the coach of Saginaw, he would be taking a hockey skate with a blade on it and shoving that hockey skate up someone's ass. With a blade on it.
That is so creative. I would tie that thing tight around the end of the hockey stick because I need momentum. And so you tie it around the tie of the hockey stick, you get and you start swinging. Okay. It's like it doesn't even matter if it catches you up the ass that point. It's like if it catches you, it's gonna do the damn you want. You gotta have the momentum. You gotta have.
Yeah, and you're the defending Memorial Cup champions. You cannot give up 7 goals at home to your opponent. 7. That is not acceptable. That is not acceptable if you're the defending champions and the opponent's best player is out. That is not acceptable under any circumstance.
I don't care if we're defending champions or not. If I'm the coach, I'm still grabbing a hockey stick. I'm still putting a skate on it. I'm still tying that something up tight. And I'm still starting to swing. You don't do that shit.
Yeah.
That's his fault. And somebody's going to pay for it. And if I top off with him, I am so sorry because I just had to sharpen that shit up after I tied it up tight. Not mad.
I think the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League and Western Hockey League playoffs are kind of more exciting than the Ontario Hockey League. I'm excited about the OHL draft. It's a deep draft. I mean, the Peterborough Petes have the number 1 pick. They describe this draft as a deep draft. But I think the OHL playoffs are kind of boring this year because Brampton's trailing their series 1-0. Porter Martone, Michael Misa, the 2 top 3 picks that are healthy, both trailing 1-0. Matthew Schaefer comes back for Erie. Erie could be a fun team to watch, but it looks like the London Knights are going to win the Ontario Hockey League for the 2nd year in a row. They lost the Memorial Cup Championship to the Saginaw Spirit last year. I think the WHL is going to be fun because you have the Medicine Hat Tigers in the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. They've won 10 in a row. I've seen 2 games of Gavin McKenna. I would argue he's at the same point Caleb Williams was at entering Caleb Williams' draft year, maybe a little bit ahead of Caleb as far as the development.
The Knights are really good.
Medicine Hat Tigers are really good. And the scary thing is they are dominating without Caden Lidstrom, the center the Blue Jackets took 4th overall. He suffered a season-ending injury in September. They are dominating without him. So what does that say about the Medicine Hat Tigers this year? They are looking really good, and the team that had the best record in the Western Hockey League was the Everett Silvertips, the team Landon DuPont's on. And yeah, I mean, Gavin McKenna and Landon DuPont, the 2 players I've talked about, the 2 players Urinating Trees talked about, they look like they're on a collision course for a rematch in the Western Hockey League Championship. Both teams number 1 seeds in their conferences. The Medicine Hat Tigers delivered a 4-0 shutout the first game of the WHL playoffs. Everett Silvertips did not. They lost 4-3. And I still think DuPont's the best player in 2027, but he gave up a hat trick to McKenna when they played the Medicine Hat Tigers. Second game, he looked better on film, but the first period, he had 1 hand on the stick instead of 2 hands. And that just irritates me because first thing you're taught when it comes to hockey, when you're 5, is skating and to keep 2 hands on the hockey stick at all times. Those are the very first 2 things you're taught from a fundamental standpoint. So to see DuPont make a rookie hiccup like that, he did rebound, he did adjust. I'll give him credit for adjusting, but see that from a future number 1 pick is a little bit disappointing. But he's still the favorite to go number 1. But if some of these other guys like Alexis Joseph, number 1 pick in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League draft this year, if Rocco Baldelli, who's at 170 and 120 points for high school hockey in Boston, he's going to go to the U.S. national team. If either of those guys show they can be a star, heck, if Cameron Warren, who had a goal and assist, plays like he did in the OHL Cup last night in the OHL next year, those 3 centers could emerge as challengers to Landon DuPont in the 2027 draft. He's still the favorite to go number 1, but I don't feel like he's running away with the number 1 pick like Gavin McKenna is, Joey. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's just the impression I've gotten. And I'm not saying DuPont's no longer number 1. He's still the favorite to go number 1, but I also get the vibe he's not running away with it. Kind of like Shane Wright back in 22. With all the hype he got. That's the vibe I'm getting with DuPont right now. But he's got 2 years to improve his game And he's got this year's Western Hockey League playoffs. And with the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, it's the Moncton Wildcats. They only lost 9 regular season games out of 60. And Caleb Desnoyers, probably the best center in quite some time. Top 10 pick in this draft. Would be a top 5 pick in any other draft, but this draft is stacked with star power at the top, so he'll probably be number 6 or 7. But if we're ranking Quebec Major Junior Hockey League centers all time, Mario Lemieux would be 1, Sidney Crosby would be 2, Nate McKinnon would be 3. There's a big gap between those 3. And then I would probably, as bold as this is going to sound, I would probably put Desnoyers at 4. But there's a massive gap between McKinnon and Desnoyers at 3 and 4. A massive gap. And I cannot emphasize the word massive, because those 3, Lemieux, Sidney Crosby, who just passed Wayne Gretzky for 20 consecutive seasons of points per game, and Nate McKinnon, the Avalanche's number 1 pick in the 2013 draft, who won a Stanley Cup. There's a massive gap between those 3 and Desnoyers. But after those 3, I think Desnoyers is the best center to play in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. But there's a massive gap between those 3 and Desnoyers. Let's not kid ourselves. It's foolish to compare Desnoyers to any of those 3, even though I do love Caleb Desnoyers as a prospect in this year's NHL draft. And I do think the Moncton Wildcats will probably win the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. They only lost 9 regular season games out of 60. Everybody else in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League lost double-digit games. So I do think Moncton's going to run away with that. But, yeah, that's just an update on the CHL playoffs. Some college hockey. I'll give you a brief college hockey update. Michigan State, the number 2 seed, got eliminated by Cornell. Maine, the number 3 seed, got eliminated by Penn State. Boston College plays Denver in the next round tomorrow. And whoever wins that rematch of last year's championship between Boston College and Denver is probably going to win the Frozen Four, knowing that the 2 seed and the 3 seed, there's only 4 teams in college hockey that are ranked. Only 16 make the college hockey playoffs, and only the top 4 are ranked. So the number 2 and 3 teams have already been eliminated in the round of 16. So whoever wins Boston College, Denver, probably looking at 4 seed Western Michigan in the semifinals and a scrub underdog team in the championship. But hey, last year I thought Boston College was going to rout Denver, and Denver made me look like idiots. So maybe Penn State or one of these underdog teams. Cornell. Cornell was the team that knocked out Michigan State. Maine won the Hockey East tournament. Hockey East was all over the place this year, because when you think of Hockey East, you think of Boston U. You think of Boston College. Maine played Connecticut in the Hockey East Championship. Northeastern made the semifinals. They didn't even make the tournament, and they lost to Maine in double overtime, which I think is horseshit considering how strong Hockey East is this year. You have Providence, you have Cornell, you have Maine, you have Connecticut, you have Boston University, and you have Boston College in the round of 16. There's about as many Hockey East teams in the college hockey tournament as there are SEC teams in March Madness. So the fact that Northeastern got to the semifinals of the Hockey East tournament, lost to Maine in double, not single overtime, double overtime. It took 5 periods for Maine to beat Boston College. The fact that Boston College didn't even get a play-in game, I think is horse crap. So, just saying, I think that Northeastern got snubbed from the college hockey tournament. But that's just my opinion. Maybe people disagree with me on that, but hey, Hockey East has just been that good in college hockey, and I think probably going to see Jacob Fowler dominate. But yeah, I wanted to keep today's show pretty short. I only had 4 topics planned. Number 1 picks in the OHL, NFL, and WNBA draft with Cameron Warren, Paige Buchers, and Cam Ward. William and I talked about the March Madness games. He picked Florida over Texas A&M. I picked Florida over Texas A&M. We both picked Duke over Bama. We both picked Tennessee over Houston. And I took Auburn over Michigan State. He took Michigan State over Auburn. I think he took Texas Tech over Florida too. But yeah, William, I think, left the chat room, even though I appreciate him stepping up today. While Joey had some other matters to deal with. And then we recapped the WNBA and NFL drafts when Joey called in. So it all worked itself out because we were able to knock out the topics not related to the drafts in the first hour. And I bet you're a little bit relieved knowing that you only had to tune in for the fun parts of the show, and everything else you didn't have to deal with. So yeah, that's it for today. But next week we'll have updates on the group mock. I'll give you a regular season update on the NHL and NBA as well, because Stanley Cup playoffs and the NBA playoffs do start later this month. We're approaching April. We're approaching the time of the year where we got to start looking at the seedings in the NHL and the NBA. I'm happy the Guardians won an extra innings. Manzardo looks like the truth. And yeah, we'll be back next week. I don't know what the thumbnail will be yet. Maybe we will preview the Final Four games, regardless of who ends up there. But
can I say one more thing?
What's up?
You got me pissed off this morning. You know, Tony Busby, the shyster, the piece of trash lawyer that I said was fucking screwing Deshaun Watson with getting all these women against him. He went after Jay-Z, and we knew this. You know, Jay-Z countersued. Jay-Z countersued, and he's got the NFL's back, because people don't realize Jay-Z works for the NFL. He works for the NFL. He's the one that got all those rappers for that Dre, basically what I call Drake tribute concert. Right there. Jay-Z is the Super Bowl halftime show. He's the big time guy. He's the one you go for. He countersued him because, and after the countersuit, the women that were going, Busby found to go against him, turned on Busby. Now Busby is now on the defense. And what did I tell you? 3-4 years ago, this Busby character, shady character, he doesn't freaking understand anything. He just took it out for money. The biggest mistake Deshaun Watson did and his lawyers did was back down. I said, go at him. Go at him, take him down. You don't go recruiting women if you get a solid case. And they all settled. They all wanted to play defense. JD wanted to play offense. He's like, oh, hell no. We ain't doing this. And guess what? Now, Tony Busby is on the defense when he started out on the offense. Why? All Deshaun Watson had to do was say, hell no, and go on the offense. He didn't. Jay-Z said, hell no, I'm going on the offense. And now Busby, people are calling for Busby being born. Because of this, all because Jay-Z decided, you ain't fucking with me. You can.
Oh, I've got something even better. I've got a Tony Busby story that can top that, Joey.
Come on.
Rachel, apparently what I've heard is Rachel Ziegler is going to hire Tony Busby to be her lawyer in the Snow White case, because there's rumors that Disney's already pulling Rachel Ziegler as a spokesperson for all these interviews she's doing with NBC, ABC, The Kimmel Show, all this stuff. Rachel Ziegler's going to hire Busby to sue Disney. That's what I'm hearing.
Why would they fire her? I know she's a little bit of a controversial figure.
But
why would they fire her? She's a great
the movie Snow White did not turn a profit. It had a budget of $300 million. It's only made $40 million in the first week.
Well, that's not fucking her fault. It's a horrible movie.
It is a horrible movie. It's such a bad movie that I have to pitch 5 movie ideas that would be less horrible than that. I mean, you could do a Cinderella live action remake with Sydney Sweeney. That would probably sell more than Rachel Ziegler as Snow White.
of them that would, with no actors and no actresses, that would outperform the storyline. Why would they look at this and say Rachel Ziegler is the problem? She's not. She's a great actress. She's a talented individual.
Well, people don't. A lot of people on the right don't like what Rachel Ziegler said about America, so they're basically just filtering out the Snow White movie and hoping it dies down.
I would hire Rachel Ziegler. If anybody who's read Shadow for Star Legacy knows Ashley is the top female protagonist. I would hire her in a movie to play Ashley in a freaking heartbeat. I don't care about all the other facts. Are you going to do the best job? Are you the most talented person available? So that's this one. Don't need scapegoats. Don't need bullshit. Rachel Ziegler is one of the most talented individuals you'll find. Do not.
Yeah, and the whole thing with Rachel Ziegler hiring Busby, it sounds like bullshit. I don't know if it's true or not. I read it. I read a tweet on X. It sounds like bullshit to me. I'm not buying it.
Well, at the same time, she would have to hire a high-profile lawyer. It's just Busby doesn't seem like the best fit to the current situation. But the thought process of Rachel Ziegler being the problem for that movie is just fucking bullshit. Rachel Ziegler is multi-talented. So she would probably go into music if she felt like it. She is a great actress. Yeah, she has some controversial takes, as far as her politics goes. Fine. Everybody does. They just don't voice them. You know why? Because they're afraid that everybody's going to turn against them. You want me to do it on here, online? Probably not. Because it's probably going to turn people against you. You don't want that. Guess what? Disney doesn't want Rachel Ziegler doing it. And this is just a personal thought process. Just get rid of Rachel Ziegler.
Yeah. All this stuff.
It's a convenience. It's convenient that they wrote the worst freaking script they could find to something they should have been.
Disney could do live action movies with YouTubers and they would sell more than Snow White. I'm not going to pitch ideas or name YouTubers because I don't want those YouTubers to get pissed off at me. It's just like politics. Sometimes it's better to not say anything.
I'm going to contact a friend. That's not an idea. We're going to see where it goes. I'm not going to disclose anything there yet, but we're going to see how that works. And we're going to see how that goes.
Yeah. If you put a Disney poll question up, what live action remake would you like to see? Snow White with Rachel Ziegler, Cinderella with Sydney Sweeney, Robin Hood with Benchwarmer Bram, or Peter Pan with Tom Grossi. He's got too much integrity to stoop that low, but he would kill it as Peter Pan.
Peter Pan is Tom Grossi because if he would do it in the same vein as Robin Hood Men in Tights, he would nail it.
Yes, he would. He would nail it to the point where that movie would make $1 billion in the box office. I really believe that.
Yeah, if you would do it correctly, like Robin Hood Men in Tights or one of the comedies, he would just knocked that out of the park. So I would have to go with Robin Hood or Tom Rossi because it's like...
I'm saying that movie would make more money than Snow White. And nobody's going to argue that.
No, absolutely not. You know, and because Tom Rossi, yeah, he does comedy in football, but he's a comedian and a teacher by trade. He does comedy and teaching by trade. It's not like he does football just paid because he was a player. So it's like if he went in and did a Robin Hood Man type comedy, oh, that would be right up his alley. That would be what he was trained for. So that would be amazing. Because it's like you would not only be a comedian, but you'd be teaching Little John. You'd be able to teach Little John and them about how to freaking screw with people. And you'd be able to teach them one line. And that would be fun. I might actually send him a message and like, would you do a short series on Robin Hood with you, Robin Hood? Just because I would like to see it. Because I know it might cheat him out of $1 billion, but...
Yeah, I mean, Alice in Wonderland with Annie Agar, another YouTuber who's a Packers fan, that would sell really well, too. I'm just saying, Disney...
She's good.
She's very good. She's edgier than Tom, but I also feel like Tom's more wholesome. But they're both great in their own right.
I'm not sure unless you're looking at a Snow White with...
I think part of the problem is a lot of people that dislike the Snow White movie think Gal Gadot, the villain in the movie, is hotter than Rachel Ziegler. So that's why they're shitting on Ziegler, which is wrong. It's wrong to do that, by the way. But that's what a lot of people on the right are doing who are trashing the Snow White movie.
Guys, remember, this is America. You have your opinions, and the people who have the facts to back them up have stronger opinions. Okay? You don't need to retaliate against it. This is what our country is founded upon. Don't get pissed off at it. Just say, I don't agree. I agree. This is wrong. Okay, I grudgingly admit this is right. And get on with your life. You're not hurting anybody else but yourself.
Oh yeah, I think Disney's suing Andrew Tate too. Last Disney rant, and then we'll end the show for good. But yeah, Andrew Tate decided to live stream the Snow White movie as the movie was playing. He didn't show the film. He didn't show the film in the background, but he live streamed video clips of him watching the movie, and the Snow White audio's in the background. I mean, that's just a very messed up decision.
What's the worst movie I could possibly think about live streaming and putting on my channel and putting my name to it? How about this one? That is just, look, I've been defending Rachel Ziegler for 3 years. I cannot defend a conscious choice to put that movie on your live stream.
Even if there's only like 1 or 2 scenes of the movie on the live stream and the rest is just audio with you goofing around, laughing your ass off in the background. And that's the thing. They rented out a movie theater. Tate and his brother rented out a movie theater and then decided to live stream Snow White in the movie theater.
Yeah. Rachel Ziegler is extremely talented. That doesn't mean you take her worst movie and make it the centerpiece of your frickin' existence online. Just don't do it. No, that's a fail. Don't do it.
Oh my gosh. That is just but yeah, that is a lot that's happening today. And I want to watch Notre Dame TCU. I know Joey's got some other things he's got to do as well, but there's some March Madness games on TBS at 5, and then there's the doubleheader on CBS tomorrow. Tennessee, Houston, and Rick Barnes, Kelvin Sampson, and then there's the Auburn, Michigan State game. But Bruce Pearl, Tom Izzo, both of those on CBS tomorrow. I think the Duke Alabama Elite 8 game's probably the best of those 4. The one that's on tonight on TBS, Alabama's tempo versus Duke's point margins. I think that's probably the best matchup of any of the Elite 8 games, because I think whoever comes out of the Duke Alabama game is probably going to end up playing Auburn or Florida in the championship. It's not that I dislike Houston or Tennessee. I just think on paper, both Alabama and Duke are better than Houston and Tennessee. That's all. But yeah, there's a lot going on, and I've got to update some code on the site. So we are signing off. I had 4 topics planned. I did not think the topics we had for the NFL and WNBA would last 3 hours, but they did. And we got enough content in, Joey, I think, without overdoing it, because Joey was only here for the second hour. So I feel like we got enough quality content in. We even had a little bit of fun at the end, but we didn't overdo it. And that's exactly what you want with these type of live streams, these type of shows. You want to get your talking points in. You don't want to overdo it with like a 4 or 5 hour show, and you don't have to. And I think we did a good job today. So thank you for calling in, even though you had some stuff off the air. I'm not going to talk about it that you dealt with earlier. And I'm going to have a good day. I'm going to end the show on both TalkShoe and Restream. And TalkShoe didn't disconnect from us either, so thank you, TalkShoe. We really appreciate that.